Reborn in the empire where the sun never sets to become a pirate. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 476, Walking into a Trap. The wind is from the southwest to the west, the wind speed is 6 knots, medium waves, all personnel are in position for the battle. On both sides, the bow guns are ready for battle, the cross sail is full, the fore and aft sail is half, the bow and wind makeup remain as they are, and are on standby at any time. Roll at each post, check the fastening ropes. The captain orders an assault. The captain said, beat the son of a bitch, beat the son of a bitch. Oh. The crowd was excited. As the flagship crew of Lorraine, every sailor on the Valkyrie is an elite mobilized according to extremely high standards. Even the interns are excellent interns. They are required to be confident, to be arrogant, to be proud of their positions and identities, and to be self-righteous and pretentious. And their experience does deserve such arrogance. On the Butterfly, Drake made the entire Northern Sea look sideways, and on the Golden Hind, Drake made the entire Caribbean frightened. The musket fleet, the mightiest of Arab navies, was reduced to a mere dwarf before the Valkyrie. The Portuguese navy, once the sun never set, was crushed by the sword of the Valkyrie. They had once been invincible. Regardless of their foe, strong or weak, brave or cowardly, every aboard believed they would remain victorious until the end of time. But today, fate had sneaked up on Blackbeard. A mere criminal pirate had driven the noble Valkyrie to such a depth. Was some evil, false god secretly aiding Drake's enemies? How could Valkyrie have fallen from her soaring steed, broken her leg, and lost her gun in what could have been a perfectly normal, full rudder evasive maneuver? No. Since such a foolish false god had chosen to be Drake's enemy, then they would defeat him, god and man alike. Beat him, the son of a bitch, Kren screamed at the top of his lungs. Beat that son of a bitch, the entire crew shouted in unison. Britannia, Lorraine unsheathed his longsword with a clang, pointing it straight at the empty horizon. Valkyrie, forward, the Valkyrie surged forward, the bulging square sails pushing her speed ever higher, 2 knots, 3 knots, 4 knots, soon surpassing her top speed of the previous half hour, and continuing to steadily increase until she reached 6 knots. Reaching wind speed, the Valkyrie's speed stabilized, the ship even more stable than its speed. Kren is a genius, Lorraine tutted his lips in satisfaction. Raise the wingsail, overwind, raise the wingsail, open the wingsail, good wind, ready, the sailhorns on the yardarms shouted, opening the wingsails. The sails snapped into full, and the Valkyrie's speed soared by a knot. Speed now, Lorraine shouted. 7 knots, 7.5 knots, 8 knots, 8.5 knots, the ship began to sway in the waves. That might not be accurate, for even the most stable ship can't remain absolutely still amidst waves and currents. A certain oscillation persists at all times. The oscillation Lorraine was referring to was an unstable oscillation, one that exceeded the effects of the waves and was sufficient to affect the ship's stability. To use an inappropriate analogy, it's like a Chang'an Benbin at 120 miles per hour. The steering wheel becomes unexpectedly light because the wheels have already, or at least are about to, leave the ground. Lorraine sighed, abandoning the attempt to reach 10 knots. With a wave of his hand, he ordered the mainmast and foremast sails to be unfurled, limiting the speed to 8.5 knots at half-mast. The lookout shouted a warning, Queen Anne's Revenge, HMS Lacey, HMS Tempest, HMS Vortex Escape, and HMS Romantica, V formed, 6 knots, relative speed 14.5 knots, contact in 3 minutes, V formation. Lorraine's lips curled up. Santa Claus brings gifts to obedient children. Your Highness, what would you like? Closer. Closer. The Valkyries charged headlong toward Blackbeard's fleet, unflinching and unevasive, as if at such high speed they had lost the ability to change direction. In the final kilometer, Blackbeard made a final adjustment to their course, turning collectively to the left. The Romantica, the last ship to fall, made the sharpest left turn, cutting diagonally across the Valkyrie's intended course. Its broadside gun ports opened wide as it cut in, like hedgehogs, their dense array pointed at the rapidly approaching Valkyries. The Romantica's captain stood at the rear of the poop, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. "We'll evade, we'll evade, we'll evade," the captain said. "If the White Banner ships are in trouble, firing or ramming them would be tantamount to seeking death, so we'll definitely evade." Ahead of the Romantica, the Tempest Ocean and the Queen Anne's Revenge spread out to their flanks, crossing with the Valkyries on parallel lines 200 meters away, each one converging and closing in on Lorraine's maneuvering space. The two sides crossed sides, crossing enemy ships 200 meters to either side. The Queen Anne's Revenge and the Tempest unleashed a barrage of fire. Lorraine's heart and soul were consumed by the urge to return fire. But he restrained himself, firing only 2 token salvos from his starboard side. No one hit. The broadside and the bombardment ended almost simultaneously. The Valkyrie's sharp bow cut through the mist, and the Queen Anne's Revenge and Tempest crossed the sea in an X-shaped arc, turning cleanly to pursue. Blackbeard was ecstatic. During the broadside, the Valkyrie had fired from its starboard side, but the bursts were sparse, with intervals lasting over 20 seconds. This result was even better than even the most optimistic expectations. The Valkyrie's condition was exactly as they had predicted. Lorraine was dead. In a trance, Blackbeard seemed to see a breathtaking sight. Lorraine lay on his knees on the deck, smeared with blood and brains, holding his long sword high, sobbing and begging Blackbeard for his life. Spare? Or not? Blackbeard pondered, watching Valkyrie dive into the carefully laid pocket. "White Banner, lower the sails," Zheng Anyue suddenly shouted in horror. Blackbeard was stunned for a moment, unable to react. Lorraine should be trying to maintain a high speed, hoping to break out of the Romantica's bow and stern before the pocket is completely closed. Of course he will fail. At such a close distance and such a high speed, with Valkyrie's current terrible balance, the Romantica only needs one direct hit to make her completely out of control. Then Lorraine's death will come. This is the script. In the script, Lorraine will not lower the sails at all. He will keep the sails hoisted, and that sail will be the first part of the ship to catch fire, like some kind of signal. But what did Zheng Anyue say just now? Lower the sails? Blackbeard's eyes slowly solidified, and his first reaction was not to look at Valkyrie, but to look down at Zheng Anyue. Valkyries? Lower the sails. Zheng Anyue's face turned pale. "Captain, retreat. This is the most ingenious and vicious trap I have ever seen in my life. We are surrounded. Our ships, the Whirlpool Escape, the Le, and the Romance, are surrounded by Lorraine's Valkyries. This is a trap, for you." Boom. Boom 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 boom. Chapter 477 The Defeated General. 5 rounds of rapid fire from all guns completed, impacts confirmed, observer confirming impacts. Directly ahead, the Romantica, 2 hits from 7, 1 direct hit, forecastle severely damaged. Confirmed navigation restricted, starboard enemy, the Rice, 1 hit from 11, no direct hits, fleeing, port enemy, the Whirlpool Escape, 9 hits from 15, poop severely damaged, direct hit to the rudder, 2 waterline penetrations, sunk, Queen Anne's Revenge and her companions, retreating. Confirmed, Blackbeard's pirates, retreating. The final report came from the lookout. The young, resonant voice, distorted by excitement and tinged with the earthy accent of the Scottish Highlands, was so clear that even if Lorraine listened intently, she could only barely make out the gist of it. However, the Queen Anne's Revenge was so close that even without the aid of the lookout, Lorraine could easily discern her old foe's movements. The report was just the icing on the cake, like the ringing of bells under the stars on Christmas Eve. Santa's gift brightened Lorraine's mood. Watching Blackbeard's Queen Anne's Revenge turn awkwardly nearby, he whispered to her. "Tell the gun cabin that His Highness needs a salute on his return, otherwise it would be too desolate." Eder excitedly crossed his legs and pounded his chest. "President, please leave the farewell to me. Go, go." Soon, the salute began. The 6 stern guns, which had never been very effective under Lorraine's command, fired simultaneously, blasting a full 19 times in a perfectly synchronized rhythm. The echo faded, and the battle ended. Despite various mishaps along the way, the Valkyrie ultimately prevailed, completing its mission ahead of schedule. As the first chapter to engage in the Battle of Bastille, the Valkyrie single-handedly fought against the 7 elite ships of Blackbeard's main pirate group, the specially modified Beige-class Queen Anne's Revenge, the Sea Battery-class Romance, the Golden Shackles, The standard level 5 galleon-class Whirlpool Escape, the Le, the Solitaire, and the Storm Ocean. Ultimately, the Whirlpool Escape and the Lone Wanderer were sunk, the Golden Shackles were severely damaged and crippled, the Romance escaped with significant damage, and the remaining ships departed. Lorraine certainly didn't want Blackbeard to get away so easily, but the Valkyrie's center of gravity issue had only been repaired to a minor level. In the decisive shelling, the ship had been severely unbalanced by the simultaneous and rapid barrage from both sides and the bow. The starboard side, at an initial range of approximately 50 meters, was completely depleted, while the port side, at a range of less than 20 meters, managed to score a spectacular kill. The scattered impact points stretched from the main deck to below the waterline, making it impossible to guess where the gunners had initially aimed. Regardless, the autumn of harvest had finally arrived for the results-oriented theorists. Lorraine's target was the two clumsy, inert sea batteries. The Golden Shackles could not move, and the Romance could not run fast. Her escape velocity was a mere 2.5 knots, effectively no different from the immobile Golden Shackles. Lorraine simply had to eat while the heat is on. He cleared his throat. Assemble on deck, Henna, Noah, and Wang Yi. Join me. In my absence, Kren will manage shipboard affairs. Then, 10 degrees starboard, target, Captain. The mizzen lookout, in charge of long-range observation, interrupted Lorraine with a panicked tone. Receiving Alvet's signal, Vice Admiral in crisis, level. Open. Level 1, in Drake's communication system, open refers to flag signals without a specific target, theoretically accessible to anyone, regardless of level. Level 1 represents the urgency of the notification. Translated into more accessible language, this signal would read, all alerts, Katerina is dying. I almost forgot our front is fighting hard too. Lorraine watched the Romantica fleeing at a snail's pace and whispered, cancel the original turn order. Valkyrie, port 5, target the Alvet, full speed ahead, target the Alvet. Help. Amidst the screams, Lewin Beek, the Alvet's gunnery officer and former stormtrooper during Operation Sea Reach, was thrown into the air by Sturgren. He slammed into the aft deck's third-floor corridor with a thud, smashing the firefighter's sand bucket and shaking the entire upper deck like an earthquake. Captain Frayne poked his head out from the upper deck, his expression tense. Lewin, are you still alive? A large hand, its skin stained with blood-soaked gravel, suddenly emerged from the sand and gestured an OK sign to Frayne. Lewin pulled his HUD free and, with great brute force, tore off the splinter of wood, as thick as his pinky, that had lodged itself in his cheek. He let the blood gush out of the sizzling wound without a single murmur. Damn you! You're so shameless. Will you drink from that hole again? Frayne let out a long sigh. Thank God, Lewin stood up, patting himself roughly, making sure there were no broken bones that would hinder his movement before looking up. Frayne, what's up with your warning? No response. Frayne's face was filled with dejection. Every regiment is dancing on the edge of a knife. There won't be many lookouts paying attention to us right now. As for the Puffins and Skewett, what happened to the Skewett? The waterline is severely damaged. It's not completely sunk yet, but it's almost there. They're all monsters, Lewin sighed as he found the two regiments on the deck. They weren't far away. On the starboard side, Bonnet was pressing Leif, while on the port side, Sturgling was running across the field, crushing over 20 sailors. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that the Alvet was not far from being destroyed. Leif was no weaker than Bonnet, but after Katerina fainted, there was a brief chaos on the deck. Stedgren, no longer restrained, joined the battle between Leif and Bonnet. In just 2 minutes, the two berserkers were outnumbered. Leif's shield was completely destroyed, and Stedgren's left hand holding the shield was also knocked off by Stedgren's shackles, completely leading to the collapse of the boating battle. Will Leif die? Or in other words, how long can Leif live? Lewin slapped his face hard, picked up the sailor knife on the ground, turned over and was about to jump off the railing. Frayne called out to him from upstairs, Lewin. Gunnery commander, I order you to jump into the sea and go to Valkyrie to seek reinforcements. Lewin stopped in his tracks. Are you crazy? This is the best solution. Frayne refused to give in. The deputy admiral resisted such a monster alone for 5 minutes. We are unforgivable, but at least, you have to rescue the deputy admiral and keep her alive no matter what. I refuse, Lewin answered firmly. The president always likes to say that we have done our best and left the rest to fate. I will resist to the end and never let that monster interfere with Captain Ericsson's duel again. After speaking, He swung the knife twice. But I agree with you. As both a superior and a beautiful woman, the Vice Admiral shouldn't die here fighting for our incompetence. You're in better physical condition than I am now, I think, Captain, the messenger interrupted Lewin, rushing to Freen's side. Captain, the Valkyrie has returned victorious. Blackbeard's ships have retreated. Brunhild and Gendel have responded and are now supporting Alvet. Brunhild, Gendel, Freen stared blankly at Lewin, about to sigh. Valkyrie spotted, 11 kilometers due south, 7 knots. Valkyrie is coming. The President is coming, hooray! The lookouts' cheers echoed across the deck, and the sailors, teetering on the brink of defeat, suddenly regained their spirits. They chanted hooray, and charged the pirates, forming groups of 3, then 2, rallying around the smaller groups nearby. The pirates' advantage on the ship wasn't instantly reversed, but their momentum, that inexplicable desire for victory, had visibly dissipated. Bonnet suddenly pushed Leif's sword away, panting, his bloodshot eyes the first to notice something was wrong. Lorraine. That useless Blackbeard was defeated so quickly. Leif, bloodied, dragged his broken left arm and right leg towards him. Bonnet leaped back to avoid the blow, and the uncrowned king slashed through the air, slamming into the deck with a thunderous, exaggerated sound, like a sledgehammer hitting the ground. A pirate ship has escaped. The Grey has the initiative. I've ordered the White Pelican and Black-Headed Gull to break away and return immediately. They're close. Just hold on for 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes. Captain Freen's hoarse voice swept across the deck, less bitter and sharp than usual, brimming with vigor and fighting spirit. Musketeers, aim at the enemy chieftain. Capture the leader first. Bang, bang, bang. Bonnet hastily twisted, shield raised, and dashed toward the blind spot near the poop. The lead bullet struck the steel shield with a melodious twang. Leif, wounded in his leg, was unable to intercept, limping as Bonnet pulled him away. Bonnet smashed through a small group of sailors, slashing them apart with a few blows, freeing several pirates. Retreat, he said. The pirate who had freed his hands was stunned for a moment. Captain, you mean, retreat? Blackbeard has already run away. It won't be long before those cowards in Skull Bay will also run away. Now is our only chance to escape. If we don't leave now, even if we can completely control this ship in the shortest time, we can't leave. The pirates looked at each other in horror, but Captain Stedgren, a newly awakened berserker, cannot be awakened by external forces, because he can't feel any information from the outside world at all. Bonnet raised his head, jumped over the pirates beside him, and stared at Leif, who was unwilling to give up the attack even though he was covered in wounds. Stedgren will cover our rear. We only have 3 minutes. Notify everyone not to fight and get on board as soon as possible. Yes. Chapter 478 Rage. His vision wavered. Like a broken camera lens, the blood-red world before him shifted constantly, now distant, now close, now blurry, now clear. It trembled violently, and he couldn't tell if it was the world itself that was trembling, or his own body. Leif knew. Berserkers were known as the killing machines of the battlefield. According to Daniel's research, their gift was likely a passive blockage of pain. As long as their function remained intact, they could consistently and consistently reach their full potential. Apart from that, they were no different from ordinary humans. Berserkers weren't omnipotent. Not only did their rage not make them invulnerable, it didn't even grant them superior recovery abilities. That's why berserkers die. Strength depleted, blood drained. Throughout history, berserkers rarely met a natural end. Their gift, while fearless, also greedily demanded sacrifices, and those sacrifices were, in fact, their lives. Leif knew his life was about to end. In the previous battle, he had been struck by 7 swords and 1 flail. The cuts to his left arm and right leg had impaired his bodily functions, while the puncture wound to his lower abdomen had caused profuse bleeding. His current reaction was likely the anemia Daniel had mentioned. Leif remembered Daniel saying that once he could detect his anemia, it meant he was almost out of blood. So this is what death feels like. With his arms drooping and his legs dragging, Leif still held the uncrowned king majestically. The gleaming blade reflected an unfocused red eye, its sharp tip pointed straight at his enemy's throat. But his enemy had changed from Bonnet to Stedgren. Due to the incapacity in his legs, he could only watch Bonnet flee from him. Compared to his impending death, this was his greater regret. Bonnet, utterly corrupted, Leif muttered, taking a step forward. His blood-red vision swirled with his limping steps, like being thrown into a raging storm. The storm was silent. All other sounds were blasted into the distance. In this silent, blood-red world, Leif could clearly hear Stedron's roar. The warrior roared, leaping high toward him, the thick yoke pressing against his head. Any downfall would surely deliver a devastating blow. Leif suddenly laughed. He remembered, back in Stavanger 10 years ago, he was still wielding a long-handled axe, and Stedron was a mere 12 years old. The youngster had shown exceptional bravery during his first heist, and as a reward, Leif had taught him his most prized killing move. It was this one. When I taught you this, you were still a child, Leif smiled, crossing his sword, puffing his chest and raising his head, staring directly at the young warrior descending from the sky with a mixture of regret and relief. By Tyr, is this why you let Bonnet escape? So that I could slay a true warrior before I die? Indeed, he's far more worthy than Bonnet is now. In that case, let me, Leif, bow your head. A sudden thunderclap. A thunderclap, almost identical to Lorraine's cry, exploded deep within Leif's mind, its origin unknown and its meaning unclear. Subconsciously, Leif's body began to move, abandoning his defenses and lowering his head. A streak of silver light swirled up from behind him, slicing through the wind and slicing through the circle, heading straight for Sturgren in midair. Sturgren sensed a threat in the silver light, more powerful than a musket, and immediately abandoned his attack. Swinging his shackles in defense. Bang! Gold and iron collided in midair, and both the silver light and Sturgren simultaneously flew back in the direction they had come from. The king had appeared. He leaped from the side of the Valkyrie, lightly leaping across the nearly 5-meter gap, bending his knees, rolling, and then, without even looking up, leaping again. Ladder. Cloud. Leap, he uttered a series of ambiguous, short syllables like a mantra, his entire body suddenly rising high. With a sweep of his outstretched arms, he snatched the reflected silver light into his palms, transforming it into his fine iron kitchen knife. He pursued Stedron, launching a second, imperative attack. Stedron hadn't even touched the ground yet. The two figures, one falling, the other chasing, merged at the moment Stedron was about to hit the ground. Wang Yi's hands clenched the hilt of his knife, and like chasing the light, he shouted again, "Split Mount Hul with force, bang!" It was a matter of seconds. In a split second, Stedron executed a powerful movement that no normal human could possibly achieve. Without any fulcrum or stable center of gravity, he swung the yoke and clashed with Wang Yi, surprisingly winning in strength. They both fell to the deck, rolling left and right like two tumbling gourds, crashing simultaneously into the side railing of Alvet. Boom! Wang Yi slammed into the railing, his lithe body clinging to its surface until his center of gravity was completely thrown off, and he used the railing's elasticity to force himself up. Sturgren's performance was the complete opposite of his own. He slammed into the railing like a cannonball, shattering it with a crash and sending him careening over the side. Just as he was about to clear the side of the ship, he opened his massive hand, pierced by Katarina, and grasped the railing, pulling it hard. Another large section of the railing was ripped apart, but he used the force to flip back onto the deck and launch a counterattack at Wang Yi. Wang Yi, using the profound bagua technique, charged forward, colliding with Sturgren in the path of his charge. Sturgren launched an initial attack with his yoke, but Wang Yi parried it with a kitchen knife, then clenched his fist into a sword and struck directly at the enemy. The blow struck the diaphragm between his chest and abdomen with enough force to knock a cow unconscious, but Sturgren showed no reaction and clamped his massive hand down on Wang Yi's head. Wang Yi easily dodged Sturgren's head-slapping blow, slipping his feet to the side and rear. The kitchen knife followed Wang Yi's steps like a shadow, slicing a bloody gash in Sturgren's waist. The force feedback told Wang Yi that the cut was deep, enough to cripple a man's mobility. Unexpectedly, Sturgren, injured in the waist, twisted his body, treating Wang Yi like a baseball, wielding the shackles like a bat. Bang! Wang Yi narrowly held the kitchen knife across his chest, blocking Sturgren's powerful blow, but his body still flew upward, hurtling towards the poop. Damn it! Wang Yi's face trembled with fear. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught Sturgren's hand. The scarred hand had at some point released the shackles and was about to grab Wang Yi's ankle. 7 or 8 silver lights swirled towards him. At Wang Yi's most critical moment, Noya's tarot card flashed from thin air, swirling directly into Sturgren's eyes. Once again, Sturgren abandoned his attack, waving his arms to sweep away the blade like silver tarots. His red eyes captivated the petite Noya, and he immediately abandoned his kingship, raising his shackles and charging at her. Noe blushed as she sidestepped to avoid him. Lorland sprinted up from behind her, his two swords unsheathed as he ran, resting them on his shoulders, firmly blocking Stedgren's rock-splitting blows. Boom! With a resounding roar, the Elvet's massive hull sank. A mortal strength, at that moment, rivaled that of a god, had actually pushed a floating island 3 feet down. Wrestling. Lorland knelt on one knee, locking Stedgren's shackles with his sturdy lower body. His arm muscles bulged, clearly struggling with an awakened berserker, even for him. Brute strength, unpretentious tactics, he whispered through gritted teeth. To defeat a berserker head-on is perhaps one of the world's most formidable challenges, but if the berserker hasn't regained his sanity in the frenzy, simply killing him is a piece of cake. With ethereal, dancing steps, Henna flashed from behind him. One foot on his back, the other on his shoulder, she soared high into the air from behind Lorraine. Unfurling her body in mid-air, she twisted 180 degrees and struck with her sword. Like an inverted cross, she plummeted behind Stedgren, head first, feet forward, and in the instant their shoulders crossed, she suddenly executed a complete somersault, a tuck, and a spin. Her wide tunic blossomed like a flower, and 2 streaks of light flashed from the petals, one pierced Stedgren's neck, the other pierced his vest. Only then did Stedgren seem to react to his new foe. He twisted his neck curiously, wanting to see Henna's true face. With that twist, the knife's tip pierced his throat, tearing out his larynx, blood vessels, and vocal cords. It scraped against the blade for a moment, and then, it was severed in 2. The furious red eyes dissipated, and Stedgren dropped his head to his knees, never to rise again. Risk eliminated, all medical personnel aboard. Daniel, I want Katarina and Leif alive, no matter what. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 479, The Legend of Captain Morgan's Treasure. Late at night, or rather, early in the morning, the morning star overlooked the silent sea, a single, dim starlight drifting in the depths. The post-battle settlement took unexpectedly long. In this battle, Lorraine used the Chamber of Commerce's 19-ship fleet to lure Blackbeard's 16-ship main force, the greatest threat to the fleet in the Caribbean. This in turn drew in local pirates led by Bonnet and the 31-ship Skull Bay combined fleet. The two sides, divided into 5 groups, engaged in a fierce battle for over 4 hours in the narrow waters off Bastère Island. Ultimately, the Valkyrie's decisive victory over the Queen Anne's Revenge secured the final victory. This victory could only be described as a narrow one. The fleet suffered heavy losses, sinking 1 brig, 2 brigantines, severely damaging the Galen-class Alvet, mid-damaged the Grey, and severely damaging 2 brigs and 2 brigantines. The battle left 261 men dead, 179 seriously wounded, and 72 declared disabled. Katarina Dubois, first Vice Admiral of the Direct Fleet and first officer of the flagship, a shareholder of the Chamber of Commerce, is dying. Leif Erikson, Chief of the Direct Fleet's Assault Command, Assault Commander of the flagship and first bosun, is also dying. Of course, the gains were also immense. The Direct Fleet sank 2 galleon-class destroyers, 4 brigantine-class destroyers, and 3 schooner-class destroyers. They captured the Golden Shackles, a specially converted naval battery, and the Bog-class Wasteful Me, 5 brigantine-class destroyers, and 2 schooner-class destroyers. They killed countless pirates and captured 1,013 prisoners, including 442 of Blackbeard's own men and 277 with bounties. These pirates, along with Durecki's handy pirates, will be handed over to the Barbados government for trial, but their fate will be different. Given the colonial government's consistent tolerance of pirates, Lorraine estimated that the entire handy crew responsible for the bloody massacre in Barbados would be hanged. The 106 pirates from Blackbeard and Skull Bay who had a bounty on their heads in Britain would also undoubtedly face death, but the majority of the remaining would be pardoned after trial, given land, and allowed to become farmers in Barbados. This outcome was not bad. By this point in the pirate wars, Drake's White Jolly Roger had established a strong reputation among the Caribbean pirates. He no longer needed to maintain his image as a pirate massacrer as he had at the beginning. A better option at this stage was to use a combination of kindness and force, using false hope to dispel the pirates' relentless resistance in future battles. This naval battle, comparable in scale to the Guild Wars, was a fitting opening. On the one hand, Drake's stance would reach most pirates making a living in the Caribbean without requiring any publicity. On the other hand, the goodwill shown through the pseudo-colonial government would not cause his guild allies to be unsure of what to do and misjudge Lorraine's stance. If there were a few more candidates for amnesty, the publicity would be even more effective, right? Lorraine pondered, leaning against a railing. The sea at night was beautiful, gentle waves lapping against the hull, and silver-like moonlight streamed across the crests. The hatch to the poop opened behind him, and Daniel emerged, his face weary and maskless, his face dented by the rubber. "Is the treatment over?" Lorraine asked, turning back. "We've barely finished the emergency measures. How are Catalina and Leif?" "They will survive if nothing unexpected happens," Daniel said. "The premise is that they will be transferred to land with better medical conditions as soon as possible. What suggestions do you have?" "Fort de France." Daniel picked up the bottle from the deck and took a sip from the bottle mouth. "Brandy, grape brandy from Manich in France. It's just ordinary stuff, far inferior to the cognac region. I can't taste it." Daniel shrugged and put the bottle back on the deck. Fort de France in Martinique is the center of the French Caribbean region. There are nobles everywhere. The medical conditions there are no worse than Kingston. Most medicines can be found on the market, and it is closer to us. Lorraine thought for a moment. The Windward Islands office is located in Fort de France. It should not be a problem to temporarily arrange a high-standard hospital. Daniel was stunned. The Windward Islands office is in Fort de France? Not in Bridgetown, Chuck's arrangement. Lorraine raised his glass and toasted toward New York. It seems they had received transaction tax concessions at the time, but Bridgerton wasn't willing to offer comparable terms, so Chuck passed on them, as expected of a family member of a high-ranking naval official. "This is the most patriotic choice I've ever heard of." "I feel like you're being indirect." Lorraine rolled her eyes at Daniel. Then, "Doctor, can I visit my patient? You're the captain. You have the final say on the ship." Soon, Lorraine and Daniel arrived at the makeshift, high-end ward. The ward turned out to be Daniel's ship's doctor's office, consisting of 2 rooms. The outer room was the Alchemy laboratory, known to the sailors as the Wizard's Castle. The inner room was where patients could lie down, and Daniel usually stayed. Unlike Lorraine's imagination, the Wizard's Castle was surprisingly clean, especially the various written materials. It wasn't piled high. Only on the desk, on the bookcase, and in a corner of the cabin, were piled about a man high. Seeing Lorraine's strange expression, Daniel was puzzled. He said unhappily, "If you're looking for a tongs pan emitting colorful smoke, sorry, you should go to the witch's room. Noah doesn't play with those dangerous things." Lorraine pouted. "I thought you were busy deciphering it." "As for deciphering it, we finished it last year." Daniel pointed to 3 beautifully decorated leather notebooks on the table. "This year, we're mainly annotating to prevent misreading proper nouns when needed." Another surprise. Lorraine walked over and flipped open the notebooks, seeing the densely packed, elegant handwriting. "Did you find anything?" "Nothing substantial. I mean, this information might allow us to successfully complete the expedition, but first, we need to know where the Fountain of Youth is." Lorraine tilted his head. "So we still need the pirate emperor's help?" Daniel nodded vigorously. 22 tokens, and we only have 5. We're still a long way from completing the puzzle." He was referring to the legend of Morgan's treasure. Legend has it that Captain Morgan hid a vast fortune in the Fountain of Youth and divided the chart of the fountain into 22 pieces, giving them as tokens to the pirate lords. However, based on the 5 tokens we have now, we don't even know what the patterns on the map are. We only know that it is completely different from a normal sea chart, combined with the fact that Morgan has descendants alive, but the pirates never thought of getting the last token. I am more inclined to believe that the rumors about Morgan are false, and that this is a conspiracy by the Brotherhood of the Sea to rule the pirates. To judge whether it is a conspiracy, you have to find more tokens first. Standard warmongering remarks. Lorraine sighed and closed the notebook. "Daniel, war is a monster that devours human lives. It is not something a good doctor should consider. I have my own reasons for disregarding human lives." Daniel looked at Lorraine coldly. "Aren't you going to visit the patient? Come with me." Chapter 480 Frankenstein. "I remember you said before that you were doing first aid." "Right, I was talking about emergency measures, which is different from first aid. But it doesn't matter. As a captain, You don't need to be proficient in all specialties, are you serious? The scene in the ward was a bit magical. 2 beds, 2 sculptures. Catalina lay on her left side, her entire body wrapped in plaster parts, including her head, neck, shoulders, chest, limbs, hips, and so on. Only her face and a small part of her upper arm were exposed. Lorraine's first feeling was that she was seeing a mummy, and her second feeling was, even the mummy was not as tightly wrapped as Catalina. Katerina, she has been confirmed to have 7 broken bones, at least 16 fractures, bruises all over her body, and dislocated internal organs. God is still very caring for her. She was injured so badly but none of her vital organs were involved. There is no comminuted fracture or internal bleeding. Otherwise, even an angel could not save her. Her current condition is like a fragile work of art. It will shatter into pieces if touched, so I fixed all her broken bones and fractures, but that's not enough, I asked the crew of the Alved at the time. She fainted during the battle. This means that the moment she woke up, her body would automatically respond to stress and would not relax until it was sure the environment was safe. This process would cost her life. To prevent her from experiencing suicidal stress, I prolonged her coma and mixed a paralytic drug with antimony, shellfish poison, and hallucinogenic powder for her to take. The paralytic drug was a drug I researched in my spare time when I was deciphering data in the crow's nest. According to experiments on animals and pirates, 10 units can kill the recipient. I've used 2 units on Katerina. If my calculations are correct, she'll wake up in 3 hours and be completely paralyzed for 6 hours. That's enough time for her to come to terms with the 3 most jarring facts. The battle is over, she's completely paralyzed, and the paralysis is an illusion. Once she accepts that, all she needs to do next is rest. The success of the treatment is guaranteed, and nothing unexpected will happen. Daniel spoke these terrifying words in the calmest of tones, sending cold sweats down his spine. He tried to put himself in Katerina's shoes. Before she passed out, she'd faced a monstrous enemy, then woke up completely paralyzed. A moment later, her doctor came back and said she'd only suffered a severe fracture, and the paralysis was a side effect of the medication. She could theoretically recover. Theoretically, she could recover. Theoretically. Theoretically. In theory. A sudden urge to slice Daniel into a Brazilian barbecue welled up in his heart, and Lorraine knew he wasn't the only one. Then, over there with Leif, combing his composure, Lorraine forced a change of subject, pointing to Leif lying on the bed to his right, his crimson eyes glaring at him. Leif was lucid. For some unknown reason, he remained frantic, his crimson eyes wide open, a gag in his mouth, and the scent of medicine wafting from his body. Generally speaking, the treatment methods for Leif were not too beyond Lorraine's knowledge. His whole body was mainly covered with bandages. Under the bandages were definitely medicines, and above the bandages, he was wearing half a full body armor. Where did it come from? 2 years ago, I asked a friend from the Alchemy Association to custom make authentic Gothic armor from Europe. Not only was it doubled in thickness to match Leif's size, but all the joints were forged to ensure that he could not move. No, I'm asking why there's this thing on the ship. Medical equipment, treatment of berserker. Daniel cleared his throat, making his cold voice sound even colder. Do you remember the Viking bloodline experiment I did before? Lorraine's face suddenly turned 3 points pale. Although I remember, I don't want to remember it at all. Daniel looked a little regretful. Leif is not as uncooperative as you, so I know much more about berserker bloodline than whalers. In summary, your bloodlines all have aspects that are different from ordinary people, but whalers tend to be daily life related, while berserkers are more like consumables on the battlefield. Research has found that whalers possess extraordinary healing abilities. Their wounds heal at a rate approximately 4 to 5 times that of ordinary people, are less susceptible to infection, and even leave very shallow scars. A berserker has virtually no self-healing ability in their normal state, but in berserker mode, their healing ability is approximately twice that of an average person. More importantly, as long as they stay in berserker mode, a berserker can maintain their vitality even after sustaining severe injuries. No untreatable conditions have yet been discovered. This is the key to berserker healing. Daniel tapped the armor on Leif's left arm, making a crisp, ding-dong sound. In this battle, Leif was struck by 7 swords and 1 hammer. 3 ribs on his left side pierced a lung, a sword wound in his lower abdomen pierced a kidney, and he ruptured tendons in his left arm and right leg. A normal person in this state would have died long ago. Even without the damage to 2 internal organs, he would certainly be disabled, but as long as he maintains berserker mode, he can recover. Daniel wore a deathly expression, his face flushed with excitement. His treatment is extremely simple: cut him open, straighten him, and then keep him going berserk until his internal organs heal and his tendons are reconnected. There's no need for any extra medication, not even pain-reducing drugs. Lorraine and Leif blinked in exactly the same rhythm. I'm not asking you how you put him back together and sewed him up. I'm asking why it's Gothic armor. One of the gains from bloodline research is that Leif can completely and thoroughly maintain his sanity while in a frenzy. This advanced change makes frenzy treatment possible, but this treatment has a flaw. Although he retains his sanity, Leif still can't feel pain when he's in a frenzy. His internal organs, tendons, ribs, and muscles and skin that were cut open for treatment are simply placed together. Without pain, it's easy for him to make overly violent movements, causing repeated damage to the wound structure. So why is it Gothic armor? Of course it's because the plaster can't hold him, Daniel answered as a matter of course. Next, he needs to maintain this state for 3 days and 3 nights without sleep. As time goes by, his emotions will only become more and more irritable. The heavy iron plaster is the only effective means I can think of to fix him. As for why it's Gothic armor, that's just my personal aesthetic. Anyway, it's not combat equipment. Using a special iron tube will not make any difference in effect. Lorraine slapped himself in the face and rubbed it hard for several rounds. One last question, Mr. Mad Scientist. Is the bit to prevent him from biting his tongue? A bit? Daniel showed an expression other than blankness for the first time tonight. Healing may be my job, not just chatting. Oh, huh? P.S. There are 3 major types of full-body plate armor in Europe: the Southern German Gothic armor, the Italian Milanese armor, and the British Greenwich armor. Which is the heaviest and most expensive? The answer is, the Milanese armor is the heaviest, and the Greenwich armor is the most expensive. Surprising, right? The well-known Gothic armor is actually the lightest and cheapest of the 3. However, lightness and cheapness don't mean that the Gothic armor is inferior to the other 2 in terms of protection. At that time, plate armor was a high-end custom product. The Gothic armor was light because of its tighter style and more form-fitting lines, while the Greenwich armor was expensive because of its extensive use of carvings and foiling, which deviated from its original purpose as a battlefield weapon. Chapter 481 Greek letter sigma, degree Cyrillic letter de degrees. Watch your step. Slow down, even slower, carry the seriously injured onto the carriages, 4 per carriage. The seriously injured will be escorted by human escorts as previously arranged. Follow the carriages, be careful. Damn it. Those papers hold valuable information for the ship's doctor. Do you want to be thrown into a cauldron and made into medicine? The Windward office will direct us to the Bellata Gardens north of town. Just follow the tree-lined avenue. The distance is another 10 kilometers. Make sure to manage your energy wisely. The escort team will be rotated promptly. At the north port of Fort-de-France, Lorraine and Daniel stood side by side at the bustling dock. I'll leave the rest up to you, Lorraine said to Daniel. If you need anything, speak to the office manager. I've set aside special funds for him. All expenses will be covered by you until the treatment is complete. Don't worry, I'll return Katerina and Leif to you alive and well. I look forward to seeing you again. After watching Daniel board the carriage, Lorraine turned and tilted her head to look at the handsome man who had been standing behind her since a while ago. Mr. Handsome was truly handsome, with a sleek bronze complexion and a sculpted face. He stood 1.9 meters tall, his broad shoulders more reliable than a seawall, his muscular shoulders more solid than rock. He wore very little, his sturdy, unadorned upper body exposed to the sun, only a thin shoulder strap holding the spear on his back and the dagger at his waist. Chenally, Mr. Handsome suddenly hunched over, a sullen expression on his face. Sir, Chenally is here. Chenally Parody was one of Lorraine's old acquaintances in the Caribbean. He had once been the chief assault officer and a key member of the Cotton Jack pirate group. He later defected at the Battle of Bimini and became a lone pirate with the Orlando, a ship Lorraine had given him. Lorraine had found him during a post-war inventory. Just yesterday morning, after visiting the patient, a sailor informed Lorraine that a prisoner had been found on a captured brigantine, and that he had been demanding a meeting with Lorraine. Then Shinori was brought before Lorraine. According to him, he had tried his best to prevent Blackbeard from mobilizing the Skull Bay pirates to join the war, and at one point, he was only one step away from success. Unfortunately, Blackbeard accidentally colluded with Bonnet, and Bonnet singled him out as an example to the pirates, who then surrendered. He was also abandoned by his own crew and imprisoned in the ship's hold until Lorraine rescued him. The story was fascinating, comparable to Sinbad's seafaring adventures, although Lorraine didn't care about the truth of the story. In Lorraine's view, Sinbad Chinori's position and identity were far more valuable than his experience. Like a pillow being stuffed into one's hand when one is deep asleep, Lorraine planned to make Chinori a role model for pirates going ashore. Chenally, Lorraine said with a smile, the Drake Chamber of Commerce is a law-abiding and respectable chamber of commerce. We never commit crimes, and we do not accept criminals with criminal records. Chenally couldn't help but glance at Catalina and Leif, who were walking away, and quickly lowered his head and said, "Yes, sir, your integrity is known to the world. I only regret that I was bewitched and led astray in my early years." This flattery made Lorraine feel comfortable all over, and Lorraine smiled even more kindly. But fortunately, Chenally, your master didn't forget to open the window while blocking the door. We are the British Chamber of Commerce, and you don't have a reward in the UK. As I said before, I plan to let you surrender in Barbados. You have never hurt a British. According to the basic principle of swords for plowshares, you will be pardoned after the trial, although this is not enough to offset your crimes in other countries. At least in the UK, you will be innocent again. How about it? Are you willing to take some risks to join the Drake Chamber of Commerce? Chenally excitedly knelt on one knee at Lorraine's feet. President, Chenally will not refuse even if he dies. Okay, you don't have to die 10,000 times. Even if Barbados hates evil, you will only die once at most. Lorraine comforted the excited and frightened future employee, turned his head and found Edley. Edley, has Captain Hanji arrived? She has arrived, President. Please ask her to come over. Yes. Seeing that Lorraine had a new meeting, Chenally quickly said, President, I will leave now. No. Lorraine waved her hand. Since you've made up your mind, it would be nice to take this opportunity to get to know your future boss. Fafnir Hange, third place in the 1984 Senior Command Department, captain of the White Pelican. In the Battle of Bastère, she led her crew to a brilliant record of 1 sinking, 1 prisoner captured, 2 wounded, and 2 assists, making her the undisputed MVP of the 4 main battle groups. Today was Lorraine's first meeting with this young female captain. She wore a plain white shirt, a matching vest, and white breeches. A dark brown belt hung with a Dublin pistol and a swift sword with an ornate gauntlet. Her high-top leather boots were embellished with shiny brass buckles and meticulously tied with ox tendon laces. She was petite, probably less than 150 centimeters tall. The mid-length trench coat, issued to captains by the Chamber of Commerce, was worn with a long, flowing effect. The purple patterns and golden tassels on the white coat accentuated her delicate figure, making her look delicate, soft, slender, and tender, without giving off the sturdy and heroic demeanor expected of a distinguished captain. Her short, fluffy orange hair, with long bangs concealing large, shy eyes and delicate features, covered most of her face, revealing only a blush and a small mouth. Lorraine's expression nearly lost control. Although he knew better than to judge a person by appearance, he still couldn't connect the shy, childlike girl before him with a brave and dedicated female captain on the battlefield. Aren't female warriors supposed to be the passionate size of Katarina? Captain Hanji? Yes, her voice was firm, though small and thin. Why did Captain choose the command department, Admiral? I was afraid to talk to strangers, and my social skills were always at the bottom of the class at intermediate school. My teacher chose shipbuilding and command, which didn't require much interaction, to help me make up the credits. After graduating as lieutenant commander, General Manager Xavier asked if I wanted to continue my studies. I didn't know I was going to the command department, somehow, she was trained to be a tough girl. Lorraine felt both amused, and even more curious about how, with Fafnir's voice, she communicated with her crew aboard. However, special teams definitely have special ways of getting along. Lorraine only needed to know that the Fafnir team was capable of fully supporting this shy captain. Compared to that, everything else was just trivial. Having figured this out, Lorraine took the battle report from Edley and flipped open it. You and your team performed exceptionally well in the Battle of Bastère, Admiral. Thank you. In light of your excellent performance, Captain Hanji, I need you to undergo a test. Fafnir's large eyes lit up, even her long, dense bangs unable to obscure their breathtaking beauty. Yes, may I ask what kind of test it is? The direct fleet will depart for de France in 3 hours. Lorraine scrolled through the upcoming itinerary, completely unaware of Fafner's unusual excitement. You know our losses in Bastille, both our own damaged and those captured. Many ships require immediate repair, but I have a small agreement with Georgian. So, Fafner Hanji, you are hereby appointed as the Chamber of Commerce's plenipotentiary representative. Admiral White Pelican, Storm Petrel, Merlin, and Hydrangea will hand over the prisoners to Georgian, and you will participate in the subsequent trial on my behalf. Greek letter sigma, degree Cyrillic letter de degree. After the mission is complete, all ships of the squadron will return to Lucy for replenishment. The White Pelican will proceed north to Sandino to receive and transfer to the soon-to-be-delivered special high-speed destroyer, the Mistral, Greek letter sigma, degree Cyrillic letter de degree. The Mistral is the first ship of the Maritime Group's second-generation special high-speed destroyer. Due to the comprehensive upgrade of its equipment, sea trials require the participation and advice of a professional team. Your second mission is to cooperate with the Maritime Group to complete the sea trials and adjustments of the new ship type. After delivery, immediately sail to Miami for commissioning. Lorraine paused and looked up. I can tell you in advance that Fleet Command has decided to replace Alvet with a Mistral as the new Vice Admiral ship and command ship of the First Fleet. So, please review your previous Admiral courses during your free time. If nothing goes wrong, you will soon become the first candidate for Vice Admiral of the Fleet, Greek letter sigma, degree Cyrillic letter de degree. Oh, right. Lorraine glanced at Chinori, then looked back at Fafner. Your team still lacks a qualified stormtrooper. This pirate, although his dressing taste is problematic, he is also a severe muscle fetish and olive oil addict, but his fighting level and boarding skills are first class in the Caribbean. If he surrenders this time and the jury in Bridgerton is lucky enough to give him a chance to start a new life, let him join your team. It takes toughness to train pirates. Lorraine dragged out a long tone. Whips and gallows are always more useful than sweet words. Please remember this. Greek letter sigma, degree Cyrillic letter de degree, degree Cyrillic letter de degree. Lorraine slapped the report back into Hedley's hand and raised his head with a smile. So, you two, do you have any questions? No problems at all, Admiral President. Chapter 482 Fatal Question. Bow correction. Starboard 3, rudder 2, port 2, vertical, engineer the towing cable, steam traction initiated, abandon rudder, towing underway, Valkyrie reverses, poop gates in. Tow stabilized, ship's attitude stabilized, first stage in place, prepare for dry docking, engines shut down, raise the mast, dry dock ready, tow initiated, pass through the docking port, tow stabilized, ship's attitude stabilized, Valkyrie enters the dockhouse, lower the gates, pump out the drainage equipment, pumping begins. With a rumbling sound of the steam pumps, the 2-hour docking operation finally concluded. Half an hour later, the piers emerged from the water, and Valkyrie, supported by the piers and keel blocks, rose into the air, officially docking. This is Miami, or more specifically, Jackdaw Town in the Miami area. More specifically, it is the Drake Ship Development and Research Center Manufacturing Department No. 1 dock, located in Jackdaw Town, which is affiliated with a general asset management company and operated by the Maritime Group. Around mid-1783, upon acquiring the Miami area, Lorraine approved a non-profit development plan codenamed The Future at an expanded meeting of the Board of Directors. This plan envisioned a 30-year, cumulative investment of £5 million to establish the Drake Empire as a leader in the future maritime sector. The core components of this plan were the Ship Development and Research Center at Lorraine's Feed and the University of Miami, which, upgraded from the advanced program of the Chamber of Commerce School and set to begin international enrollment next year, were focused on technology and talent, respectively. The fledgling Ship Development Center comprised 7 research laboratories, including 2 ship design laboratories, the Clipper and Dreadnought laboratories, the Sail Propulsion Laboratory supporting the Clipper project, the Metal Ship Material Laboratory supporting the Dreadnought project, the new Naval Gun Laboratory, the Steam Propulsion Laboratory, and the Automated Fire Control Laboratory. The center also housed 3 unconventional, highly mechanized shipbuilding docks: 80-meter, 60-meter, and 30-meter. The first dock the Valkyrie entered was an 80-meter class dock. Plans also included 2 more, 120-meter and 200-meter class docks. Barring any unexpected developments, they would be completed within 15 years, depending on the laboratory's progress. After the pumping was complete, The Valkyrie's sailors disembarked, laughing and gathering in small groups, walking out arm in arm. Atrin walked in front, with Lorraine, Kren, Henna, and Noah trailing behind. After jumping off the boat, Lorraine looked back at the Valkyrie's port side riddled with holes. Although I've seen it several times before, my heart still beats wildly every time I see it. Kren pointed to the most conspicuous one in a large area of craters as a matter of course and said, at the same position, the first 32-pound bullet penetrated the armor, the second 32-pound bullet damaged the shell, and then another 18-pound bullet hit the bullseye. If the 18-pound bullet was replaced with a 24-pound bullet, our gunpowder compartment would have been pierced. It will definitely penetrate, and in all likelihood it will ignite the gunpowder. Thank God, we escaped. Lorraine patted Kren's arm. How about it? Do you have the corresponding reinforcement draft? Prepare to install a part of the metal endoskeleton, and cooperate with a steel cable to strengthen the safety of the artillery and the gun carriage. A few steel cables can prevent the artillery from tipping over. No, at most it can only prevent the barrel from running around, and it is completely useless for the 48-pound mortar. If it wants to penetrate the bulkhead, it only needs to launch itself out. What an inspiring speech, Lorraine exclaimed. How long will the repairs take? If it's just to restore it to its original state, 30 days. If we need to do the necessary modifications, it will take 90 days if everything goes smoothly. 90 days, that means I won't be able to go out to sea for 3 full months. What a long vacation, Lorraine sighed. Henna, does your heart beat? Yes, Henna answered without hesitation. Only a dead heart doesn't beat. Leaving the dock is Drake's Miami. Knowing Miami's future scale, Lorraine boldly applied a functional, connected town plan when designing the town. Entering the Bay of Biscay and crossing the island of Biscay, the core of the connected town, Bayou Town, is located on the beach at the mouth of the Miami River. Facing Virginia Island across the sea, its centerpiece is the pure white, faux Rococo-style City Hall. Surrounding it are the Garden Market, Bayou Church, the Town Council, and Labor Square, which is intended to house the future General Labor Union. These 4 completed core buildings, located east, south, west, and north of the City Hall, along with 4 other vacant rectangular plots, divide the town into 3 horizontal, 3 vertical shape. 3 communities have already been established in Rivermouth Town. Thanks to the pre-operational research center, university, and marina, Rivermouth Town's population exceeded 2,000 at the beginning of the year, and the town welcomed its first local baby in March. Continuing north along the coast, 18 kilometers from Rivermouth Town, lies College Town, centered around the University of Miami. Its 2 major colleges, the Business School, are located west of the town, nestled against a hillside, and the Maritime Academy, also west of the town, close to the sea. Although small in scale, the Drake Chamber of Commerce Museum, a significant institution for the Chamber of Commerce, is also located in this culturally rich town. Continuing north along the coast for another 20 kilometers from College Town, lies Jackdaw Town, where Lorraine currently resides. This area, nestled in the middle of the Bay of Biscay, houses the headquarters of the First Fleet, its anchorage, and the Ship Development Research Center. Therefore, it is considered a key location within the town. Jackdaw Town also has a crucial component. Located 5 kilometers north of the town, it lies a beautiful stretch of waterfront, backed by a lake and facing the ocean. It's called Pansy Manor. Nearly all the high-ranking members of the Drake Chamber of Commerce have built their own mansions there. These sprawling estates, each in a unique style, are interspersed with ranches and farms run by the Chamber, as well as villages founded by older Drakes who dislike the cramped conditions of the town. The rolling grassy hills teem with life. Leontown also boasts a crucial component, Miami Beach. Miami Beach forms the eastern edge of the Bay of Biscay, a vast, flat sandbar. It's the commercial port of the Miami region. The Chamber of Commerce has built a massive port with 37 boardwalks and 116 large and medium-sized berths. Over 100 chambers of commerce from the 100 Merchants Association have invested in and operated businesses there. After more than 2 years of development, it has become one of the most prosperous commercial hubs connecting North America and the Caribbean. Jackdaw Town strengthens its foundation, College Town cultivates its spirit, Bayou Town nourishes its soul, and Miami Beach prospers its profits. In just 2 years of development, the Miami region is already showing the thriving momentum that underpins the Chamber of Commerce. The conditions here are unique. Golden shipping routes, easy to defend, and unobtrusive, with no overbearing foreign powers. Even the Indians, scattered across Florida and seen as an obstacle to conquest, are seen by Lorraine, who has no political ambitions, as simply a group of honest, strong, and cheap labor. It's fair to say that Miami's rapid growth is largely due to inferior liquor, flour, and obsolete guns. The carriage clattered lazily toward them. Adr opened the door, and Lorraine helped Noah aboard. He turned to look at Henna, touching his chest in an inviting gesture. Henna gently took Lorraine's hand. 3 months, what do you want to do? Nothing, Lorraine grimaced. We've been at sea for 8 months since we left for Europe last October. It's a good time to slow down while the Valkyrie undergoes a major overhaul. Such a beautiful lady. May I invite you to accompany me on a tour of this beautiful and peaceful lion's den? Lorraine expected a gentle "it would be a pleasure," but Henna stepped into the carriage and sat down next to Noah. Let's go shopping. What about Noah? Oh, Lorraine hesitated for a moment. Actually, I invited Noah a while ago. The carriage door slammed shut. Henna's cold voice echoed from within the closed compartment. Departure, Pansy Manor. The hired coachman, completely unaware of Lorraine's identity, whipped his horses to attention. The carriage left. The gentle summer sea breeze ruffled Lorraine's temples. Lorraine stood at the center of a group of people who were eager to see the world in chaos. I saw Ghost. Even if Carmen is not here, I can't escape the fatal question. Chapter 483 Lorraine Drake's Long Vacation. 2 months had flown by in the blink of an eye. It was July, the scorching air twisting wildly under the blazing sun. The temperature outside had been climbing steadily higher, and even on the evenings when the sun rested, it offered no sign of cooling, leaving no room for effort. Lorraine lazily slumped on the sofa, eyes closed, enjoying the gentle and firm pressure on his scalp. Noah's fingers held a magical power. His seemingly mundane movements not only sapped the heat but also drained away his strength, plunging him into a strange, trance-like space, detached from all elements of reality. The long vacation continued. At Pansy Manor, Lorraine and his crew enjoyed a rare moment of leisure. Fishing, barbecuing, swimming, sunbathing, and occasionally hunting in the woods or boating on the lake. Every plant, tree, and creature here was the property of the Drake Chamber of Commerce. Pansy is to Miami what Beverly Hills is to New York. Its 30,000 acres are teeming with mountains, water, deep abysses, and forests, boasting long, narrow, pure white beaches and a scattering of small, irregularly arranged boardwalks capable of accommodating small boats over 10 meters long, and specifically, yachts, which are harmless to humans and animals. Over 20 mansions of varying styles are scattered throughout the estate, some adjacent to each other, others far apart. Some serve as primary residences, while others are only used occasionally when their owners are away on vacation. Their owners are all prominent figures in the Chamber of Commerce or the town, and dedicated housekeepers provide year-round care and maintenance, regardless of their home or family. There's also an Indian village of over 300 and 3 pioneer villages with a combined population of over 600. Many of these pioneers are Drake's long-term contractors, who have settled here due to illness, disability, or a love of the countryside. The backbone of the Indian village is Lucy's former freedman. Keo's Mosquito tribe isn't here, and they don't rely on the service industry for their livelihoods. Their primary concentration is in the working-class community of the Bayou town. These 2 tribes are key to Lorraine's close and mutually non-interfering ties with the native Florida people. Ultimately, the Indians couldn't truly trust white outsiders. Only through these whitened brethren could they patiently understand the differences between the Drake Chamber of Commerce and other white people. The Chamber of Commerce neither viewed them as a threat nor had any interest in enslaving them. Their relationship was purely commercial, with Drake using their scarce supplies to purchase labor and inexpensive raw materials like wood, stone, and soil. During the course of these transactions, some Indians chose to relocate to the town, primarily for marriage, but also for work, such as finding suitable employers in Miami Beach outside the Drake Chamber of Commerce. This further deepened the integration of Miami and the Florida Peninsula. All in all, Miami Town Line's development should be promising, right? Stable and growing immigration, limited and peaceful indigenous encroachment, a fair yet white-dominated social order, legislation and administration fully embodying Drake's values, and a rapidly booming regional economy. In any other colony, Lorraine would have asserted a bright future for Miami, quickly gaining recognition and becoming a formal administrative unit. But in Florida, ethnic conflict was undoubtedly Florida's primary conflict. As the largest concentration of Native Americans in North America, it was home to hundreds of tribes and millions of Indians. These powerful peoples had no need to beg for survival at the mercy of whites. On the contrary, despite nearly 300 years of vying for control of this land since the Spanish landing in 1513, whites had never truly established themselves as masters, let alone engaged in large-scale development like Miami. Lorraine knew that the great powers were not optimistic about Miami's development. Spain, the internationally recognized ruler of Florida, had been unwilling to send a mayor and tax collector from Fort St. Augustine to take up their posts, even though, at Lorraine's behest, the town council had submitted 3 rounds of applications to the governor's office. "Why are you so determined not to have anything to do with Miami?" Lorraine muttered, shifting into a more comfortable position, resting her forehead against Noah's soft belly. She opened her eyes and gazed out the floor-to-ceiling window. The view from the window was breathtaking. Sunlight streamed through the clear glass, carving a square patch of bright yellow on the carpet. In the middle of the bright yellow, henna and white ear lay sideways in the same position, like a pair of asymmetrical brackets, reading Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. Lazy and expressionless, henna, made of water, supported the heavy book, while white ear, made of water, blinked its amber pupils. Having probably finished a page, white ear licked her paw and reached for the page. Henna slapped the cat's paw away, licked her fingers, and flipped to the next page. No one was willing to break the pleasant silence, but the problem was that the book was a Spanish translation, and as far as Lorraine knew, neither white ear nor henna could understand the words in the book. Lorraine couldn't help coughing. "Henna, aren't you hot?" Henna peeked out from the pages of the book. "It's quite warm, and the melted ink smells nice." Then why do you turn the pages? The smell will fade if a page is exposed to the sun for a long time." This explanation was really impeccable. Lorraine patted Noah's hand and sat up. "Henna, do you think the Indians will attack us?" "Attack?" Henna thought for a while. "There are 7 Indian tribes within 100 kilometers. The mosquitoes have sorted out their intelligence, and there are 74 people in total who are qualified to be tribal leaders. As long as they are all killed, these tribes will fall apart." Meow. Lorraine's face was full of emotion as if you had known this. "Noah, what do you think?" "Miami is very friendly to the Indians." Noah lowered his head, his expression less impressive than the white ears. "If the Roma encountered neighbors like these, we would certainly enthusiastically perform songs and dances for them, but when we part, we might ask them for a little money, just a little. You know, the Roma don't ask for much." Lorraine took a moment to understand. "You mean the Indians might want more?" "I don't know." Noah lowered his head even lower. "But just like no one wants to trust the Roma, you don't really trust the Indians, do you?" "Really?" Lorraine's confusion was immediately resolved. Noah had hit the nail on the head. The root of all the problems lay in trust. The Spanish, the Indians, and Lorraine, the 3 core parties influencing Miami's development, none of them was willing to truly trust the other 2. The Spanish didn't believe Miami could continue to develop smoothly and without interference, nor did they believe Lorraine would truly and completely hand over Miami's power. Lorraine didn't believe the Spanish's greed would stop at administrative power and a small amount of tax revenue, nor did he believe the Indians would remain as law-abiding as they were now. The situation with the Indians was similar. They'd probably been waiting for Spain to kick Lorraine out of her formal puppet, or for Lorraine to shed her mask of affability and hypocrisy. The awkward 3-way relationship had left Miami's city hall vacant. Without a mayor with official ties, Miami couldn't upgrade from a privately run Blackport to true town. This wasn't good news. While in the short term, the Blackport model allowed the Drake Chamber of Commerce to reap the Miami region's lucrative tax revenue and other benefits. Throughout the history of the age of exploration, was there ever a Blackport with a shelf life exceeding 30 years? On the short-sightedness and weakness of the bourgeoisie, Lorraine suddenly recalled a seemingly plausible slogan she'd often heard in her previous life. Short-sightedness and weakness are flaws, not so much inherent flaws of the bourgeoisie as they are inherent flaws of the human species. Humans are profit-driven creatures, small profits are wealth, medium profits are fame, and large profits are morality. Merchants prioritize small profits, and therefore short-sightedness and weakness are particularly evident in them. Merchants are driven by profit, living and breathing it. They are easily tempted and led astray. In today's social context, in the absence of constraints, they are prone to breaking boundaries and rules for the sake of immediate gain. Examples include looting, smuggling, and selling stolen goods. Those who go against the grain will inevitably face doom, a truth most people understand. However, the nature of capitalism also predisposes merchants to temptation. Towns run solely by merchants will inevitably drift down the wrong path, until criminals become the mainstream and the town is doomed. Formalization is the only correct path for commercial towns to achieve long-term prosperity. Joining a state, with its enforceable constraints and legal concepts, will become shackles for merchants and constraints for citizens. At first glance, Lorraine would lose much, including administrative and legislative powers, as well as some tax revenue. But Miami would become a law-abiding place, and only then could Drake's foundation prosper in the long run. Lorraine slapped his face gently. Spain doesn't want to enter Miami. On the one hand, they're not optimistic about Miami's development and don't want to provoke the Indians. On the other hand, Miami is developing too fast, and the Drake Chamber of Commerce has too much control over the town. Then let Britain take over Miami's administration. No, Spain will go crazy if we hand Miami over completely to Spain, and let the Chamber of Commerce become residents and guests. No, I'm not going to be fooled, then maintain the status quo. It's okay in the next few years, but if it lasts more than 10 years, it will be detrimental to Miami's development. When will the United States be able to free up its hands to deal with Florida? If it really doesn't work, what about establishing a country? At this point, Lorraine picked up Noya's little hand and slapped herself, scaring Noya. But Lorraine seemed unaware and continued to talk to herself. Seeking to establish a country in North America in the 18th century. Although Spain is indeed much easier to bully than Britain, Miami is far inferior to the 13 states, and the Drake Chamber of Commerce is no match for the Continental Congress. Nothing works, so we really have to have a good talk with the Spanish, Carmen. Judging by the time, she should be back, right? Chapter 484. Where to stay tonight. Speak of the devil, and he will return. On July 10th, his 25th birthday, Lorraine received word that the Pierce Sturgeon fleet had returned. 7 days later, Lorraine saw the long-missed HMS Grande Dame at anchor in Jackdaw Town. The slender warship slowly approached the shore, the planks lowered, and Jenny and McCarthy scrambled out, howling and croaking, before fluttering onto Lorraine's shoulders. "Happy birthday, Captain," Carmen smiled sweetly, poking her head over the side of the ship, glancing at the empty plank road and puffing out her cheeks. "I thought I would get a warmer welcome." Lorraine shrugged regretfully. "Catherine and Leif are recuperating in the hot springs in Fort-de-France, and Daniel is taking care of them. Valkyrie is undergoing overhaul in Dock No. 1, and Kren is taking care of her. Wang Yi hitchhiked to Boston to visit a friend, and Belle is washing diapers in Lucy. Atron is quite free, but he was caught cheating in bed by Cecilia a few nights ago, so, you know." Pierce poked his shadow out from behind Carmen in surprise. "Atron was caught cheating again? Brother, who is the object? A best friend? A maid? Or a prostitute?" "I heard it was a teaching assistant from the school." Lorraine took Carmen off the boat, took the luggage, and handed it to Edley. "Cecilia hired a teaching assistant to teach her Latin during the summer vacation. As a result, Atron was tutoring her in foreign languages most of the time." "Wow. Wow." The three of them stepped onto the seawall talking and laughing. Pierce was soon called back by his sailors, leaving only Lorraine and Carmen. Carmen narrowed her beautiful eyes. "There are two people you didn't mention, Captain. Yesla and Noah have been living with you these days, right? Were you caught cheating in bed too?" "Caught cheating is a very broad term." Lorraine opened the carriage door and spread her elbows. "It's like living together. Don't forget, when we were in Lucy, we all lived under the same roof, and the situation is similar now, but Miami is not Lucy. Besides them, even little Pierce built a villa for himself. Little Pierce is an adult now and no longer needs a guardian." Lorraine jumped into the carriage behind Carmen, closed the door, and sat firmly. "You know that Noah can't accept having her own house and her own servants. As for Hannah, she doesn't even want money. I always feel like I'm the only one who miscalculated." Carmen's voice suddenly lowered, and she mumbled as if she deliberately didn't want to explain clearly. Lorraine couldn't hear clearly for a moment, and asked in a daze, "What did you just say?" "I just said," Carmen rolled her large, distinct black and white eyes like a fox, "I don't like living alone in a big house either. Can I stay at the captain's this holiday? If you don't like it, you built yourself 68 rooms. Father is moving the whole family to Miami, and I have 6 brothers and sisters." Carmen smiled particularly charmingly. "Captain, can I stay at the captain's?" You're welcome anytime. Adults have their own joys, and young people have their own energy. Pierce, Dylan, Zheng Anyue, and Sharon gathered together. Pierce asked Dylan, Dad, I just heard that Valkyria is undergoing major repairs. Although I don't know how she was injured, I don't think the new mission will come soon. During this period, I plan to let the sailors of the fleet temporarily live in the anchorage dormitory. Although the conditions are a bit poor, at least food and accommodation are provided. If you want to have fun, there are regular ferries between Jackdaw Town and Miami Beach. Sailors don't have to go to the dormitory for hard training. My house has 36 guest bedrooms, which are enough to accommodate everyone. Yes, Admiral, Dylan's style has always been meticulous and reliable, which can well make up for Pierce's roughness. I will ask Flyman to arrange the dormitory immediately. If there is any expenditure, it will be convenient to pay from the fleet's finances. Expenditure? Pierce was stunned. Do we need to spend money to use the dormitories directly under the fleet? Jackdaw Town is the anchorage of the First Fleet, and Lucy is the anchorage of the Second Fleet. The Special Service Fleet is considered the Third Fleet in terms of organization. Jackdaw Town has not taken our budget into consideration. If you want them to provide food and accommodation, you must help them make up the shortfall. Pierce suddenly realized, then let free money go together, and pay the fees that should be paid directly. After all, the funds of the First Fleet are much tighter than ours. Yes, Dylan said solemnly. As for the temporary placement of the seafarers, as far as I know, Flamin and I can go to my son-in-law's house. Oh, yes, Mr. Solero works at the center. If Dad goes there to live, he can just reunite with Miss Monica. Dylan smiled embarrassedly. Drago has his own house in Hekau Town. Zheng Anyue should live in Mr. Wang Yi's house. Little Sharon will probably live with Manager Xavier, and Turner will definitely go to find Mr. Scott. And Leigh and Audria, as well as the families of at least 14 or 15 seafarers in the fleet are in Miami. I need to know whether the nature of this camp is a holiday or a training camp. If it is a holiday, you won't need to take in too many people. If it is a training camp, I have to notify them to return to the base immediately after visiting their families. Pierce opened his mouth, and felt more and more that he thought too simply about a simple question. It was like this when arranging dormitories for the sailors before, and it was also the same when preparing to entertain the seafarers later. The only thing to be thankful for was that it wasn't a public lecture. He gathered his thoughts. On this tour, we spent a full year at sea, traveling halfway around the world. There's no moral or logical reason for me to continue depriving them of their vacation. Starting today, everyone is on paid leave. Personnel are allowed to move freely within Miami, but those leaving must report to their immediate superiors. Regardless of whether they leave Miami or not, they must register their contact information to receive notifications. Sailors and seamen are treated equally. As for those without housing in Miami, I'll arrange it for the seamen. All sailors will be put into dormitories. That's it, Dylan nodded with satisfaction. Yes, I'll issue the order immediately. This simple order taught Pierce a lot. He reflected on his previous thought process and suddenly remembered something. By the way, Zheng Anyue is staying at my house. Brother Wang Yi isn't home. I heard from him that he went to Boston. Oh, Zheng Anyue agreed as a matter of course. Pierce looked at Sharon. Sharon, are you going to Sister Carmen's place? We'll go back in the same car, it's on the way anyway. Little Sharon blushed. I'm staying at my cousin's house too. Huh? I'm staying at my cousin's house too. Sharon's voice got a little louder, finally rising from being completely inaudible to being faintly audible. I can stay in the same room with Zio, and it won't take up any extra room. Pierce didn't get the crux of the matter at all, scratching his head with an embarrassed look on his face. Isn't it a bad idea for you to stay here? Sister Carmen likes to order people around. If you're not with her, the teacher went to stay at the president's house. She said she doesn't like living in an empty big house. I believe she can convince the president. Sister Carmen doesn't like living in a big house. Pierce's eyes widened. Are you kidding? Her house is the largest in the whole estate. She's not at home anyway. Little Sharon was angry. She raised her head and poked Pierce with her eyes fiercely. She doesn't like living in an empty house. I don't like it either. Chapter 485, City of Fire. Chairman, your tea and pastries, put them down. Hearing Lorraine's response, the sturdy, black secretary quickly arranged the tea and tea set. Then, lifting the pastry tower with one hand and flexing her biceps, she delicately placed it in the center of the coffee table. The pastries were perfectly executed, A three-tiered porcelain plate decorated with pink and emerald green borders. The top tier contained tiny sandwiches, each size to fit in one hand. The middle tier was filled with sweet scones, also shaped into a triangle. The bottom tier was filled with tiny, vibrant blueberry cakes, all surrounding a delicate fruit tower carved into the shape of a lily. Lorraine, Henna, and Noah each found a sofa and sat down. Lorraine poured Noah's tea first. The hawthorn red tea, fragrant and fragrant, poured into the pristine white porcelain cup. Its aroma was rich and mellow, with a fresh, sweet flavor. One sniff revealed it was top-quality cumin tea. Lorraine's eyebrows twitched. "Madam, Aquara, Chairman, my name is Aquara Timothy, Ms. Timothy, please thank the manager for his hospitality. It's excellent black tea." Lorraine offered a mild compliment, but surprisingly, Aquara immediately caught on. "Chairman, this tea is the finest cumin tea from the East. It's said that even the royal family in London only drinks it occasionally. We only have enough in the office for one tea party. President Parker sent it here after you arrived in Miami, saying you might need it." Her response startled Lorraine for a moment, and it wasn't because of Parker's preparations, but entirely because of Aquara's response. "A black woman." Lorraine's curiosity piqued. "Madam, I apologize in advance if this is offensive." He cleared his throat. "Are you mixed race?" Aquara, ever so perceptive, immediately caught on to Lorraine's confusion. "I'm a full-blooded black man, Chairman. My ancestors are from Tanzania, and 6 generations of my family are black, pure blood. I was born in Fort Mose. Timothy was given to my grandfather by the Spanish gentleman who granted him his freedom when he escaped from the cotton plantations in Georgia. According to our custom, although my grandfather was freed, he was still considered an abolitionist. My father was a first-generation free settler, and I'm second." Listening to Aquara's story, Lorraine and the other two finally understood the greatness of Fort Mose. It was a magical place. In 1693, to counter the British threat to Florida, King Charles I of Spain declared that slaves fleeing British territory would be free in Florida if they converted to Catholicism. 45 years later, in 1738, the governor of Florida authorized a fortified settlement north of St. Augustine for former slaves. This became Fort Mose. Unlike the shady New Orleans, Fort Mose was the first free black town in North America to be recognized by mainstream law. Whatever the intentions of the white people who founded it, Spain was truly at the forefront of the world in terms of human rights equality. As a result, black people here had transformed, becoming the fabric of society, no longer simply its foundation. At the end of their long conversation, Aquara smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry, Chairman, I was so impulsive that I interrupted you and the two ladies while we were enjoying tea. No, you're so knowledgeable and talkative, I enjoyed it very much. Your compliment is the best compliment to the entire firm," Aquara said, bowing, holding her tray. "Please enjoy this afternoon in St. Augustine. Goodbye, goodbye." After seeing Aquara off, afternoon tea continued. Lorraine handed the tea to Noah, brewed a second cup, and pushed the milk and sugar jugs to Henna. Henna was busy studying the strange-looking scones, completely absorbed and motionless. Lorraine chuckled. "What? You've never seen a triangular scone? Well, I've only had round and square ones, and they're not that hard." Lorraine took a scone, spread blueberry jam on one corner, and then spread fresh cream on the blueberry jam until it was completely covered. He handed it to Henna. "Try it." Henna bit off the coated corner in one bite, swallowed it in a few slurps, and licked the corner of her mouth with her tongue. "How does it taste?" Lorraine asked. The butter is smooth, the jam is sticky, and the scones are hard when you bite them, but not that crispy when you chew them, like brown bread with butter, but it's sweet, so it's delicious." Lorraine rolled her eyes. "Anything sweet tastes good to you." He poured himself some tea. Scone comes from a stone at the coronation side of the Scottish royal family, called the Stone of Destiny or the Stone of Scone. They have a saying, "Everything is the choice of scone." Everything is the choice of scone. This is often said by the victors to show that they have destiny. Noah opened her eyes wide with curiosity. "Do the Scots like to be chosen by the bread so much?" It's chosen by the Stone of Destiny, so scones also mean good luck." They all suddenly understood. The two girls began to enjoy their good luck. Lorraine stood up with her tea and walked to the shutters alone. She sipped her tea and quietly looked out the window at the sun-scorched street. This is the Florida office of the Drake Chamber of Commerce's American branch, located on St. George Street, the busiest street in Fort St. Augustine. the Spanish Governorate of Florida. Through the gaps in the shutters, Lorraine could see the smooth stone-paved avenue, flanked by rows of low, red-roofed, white-walled tiled buildings. Though unevenly spaced, the red bricks defined a uniform outline, adding a sense of harmony to the continuous rows of tiled buildings. The office is one of the taller buildings on St. George Street, and from Lorraine's vantage point, he could easily overlook the street. Directly north of the street lies the town center, St. Augustine Cathedral. Nearby stands the broad, domed City Hall. To the east, the San Marcos coastal fortress, guarding the sea, stands a towering red and white lighthouse on the fort's seawall. Lorraine quickly noticed the town's distinctive character. Simple and sturdy, the large buildings that make up the main structure resemble independent fortresses. Spire towers have been replaced by gun emplacements and watch towers, and gilt-in-relief carvings have been replaced by arrow emplacements. The bloody remnants of history, Lorraine murmured. Hannah wiped her mouth and came to the window. Xavier hasn't come back yet. Lorraine shrugged. Carmen went ahead. I heard that the mayor is not an easy fool to deal with. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to manage the town in order in just 1 year after taking back St. Augustine. 1 year? Ms. Timothy just said that this place belonged to Spain 100 years ago? Right, actually, it was earlier. Lorraine sorted out the information in his mind. In 1513. The Spaniard Juan Ponce de Leon landed on the beach while pursuing the traces of the Fountain of Youth. He declared for the first time that Spain owned the Florida Peninsula and established the first colonial outpost in North America here, but he died soon after. He was shot to death by an Indian with an arrow in the heart. Lorraine pointed to his heart. Of course, the colonial outpost was also slaughtered. A few years later, Hernando de Soto once again attempted to establish a colony here. However, his performance was even worse than Juan León's. The operation failed, and he and his followers hid in the mud and woods of Florida for 3 years until they were completely lost, and they never received any rescue from their Spanish homeland. Spain's love for this land is genuine, Lorraine scoffed. From 1513 to 1559, they failed at least 5 times, and a conservative estimate is that over 1,000 people died in a foreign land. In the end, even the King of Spain was shaken by this profound love, and was forced to forcibly exercise his royal authority to prohibit his subjects from further colonizing Florida. At this point, Lorraine paused. Hannah frowned at him, feeling that he had something else to say. This sudden history lesson was definitely not to show off his knowledge. Fortunately, there was no one to help him. The story was at a critical juncture, and Lorraine couldn't help asking as soon as she paused, who built the current St. Augustine? When was it completed? It was in 1565. Lorraine tapped the rim of her cup lightly. French Protestants built Fort Caroline on the beach north of St. Augustine, openly interfering with Spain's ownership of Florida. Although Spain had no real interests in Florida at the time, they had paid too much before, and the king had no choice but to fight. He sent Sir Menendez and the elite Spanish musketeers to fight. On a rainy night, the Sir broke through Fort Caroline and massacred all the male residents he saw. After that, he built Fort St. Augustine. Spain set up the Florida governor's office here. The Sir was the first colonial governor, and the governor appointed the first mayor. Although the good times didn't last long, in 1568, French privateers joined forces with pirates and Indians to launch a bloody revenge, massacring the newly built Fort St. Augustine. But Fort Caroline of France disappeared forever, while St. Augustine of Spain was quickly rebuilt and became more prosperous than before. In 1586, my ancestor Francis destroyed the town. In the following 100 years, Indians committed massacres here 3 times, in 1665, 1702, and 1740. The town was destroyed 3 times, she was destroyed and rebuilt again and again, and each time she was rebuilt, it was like a new life, becoming stronger and more prosperous. Even in 1763, because the Anglo-French War chose the wrong partners, the town was handed over to the British for 21 years. Once it returned, it was still the pride of the Spanish. This is the past of Fort St. Augustine. Lorraine spoke in a flat tone, recounting the exciting past of the town beneath her feet. It's obviously just a small town built of corpses. Apart from fish, it doesn't have any special products worth boasting about. Its commerce and culture are not prosperous, but she is undoubtedly full of pride. As the earliest white town established in North America, as the first town in the world to treat people of color equally, and as a town that has been reborn from the ashes countless times, her pride will not disappear with the passage of time. but will only grow stronger. Hina finally grasped a clue. You mean, St. Augustine was reborn again and again because it was government-run, while Fort Caroline in France died out after one setback because it was privately run? Yes and no, Lorraine smiled. Private and government-run are not the key. The key lies in the official. Only by formally establishing a government office can a town exist for a long time. Without this status, the town is like rootless algae. Not only is it unable to choose the direction of its own development, but when it is hurt, even survival seems like a fantasy. The tenacious town of others and the fragile town of your own. A trace of confusion appeared in Hannah's eyes. I always thought you preferred the latter. Normally, if the price of making Miami persevere is to hand her over to the Spaniards, I would most likely give up this action. Lorraine paced and put down the teacup. Fortunately, handing her over to the Spaniards is not a necessary prerequisite for Miami to gain status. I have better chips. Use the lowest cost in exchange for the greatest benefit. Hannah, we are businessmen. This is just our job. P.S. Ms. Ockfair Timothy's afternoon tea lecture. Scone. Ingredients. 1. Sweet scones. 500 grams of flour, 150 grams of sugar, 3 eggs, 20 grams of baking powder, 150 grams of butter, 250 grams of milk. 2. Salty scones. 500 grams of flour, 75 grams of sugar, 4 eggs, 20 grams of baking powder, 150 grams of butter, 250 grams of milk, 10 grams of salt. Preparation method. 1. Making the dough. Sift the flour, add baking powder, put it on the table and make it into pond. 1. Melt the butter and sugar. Beat the eggs and add milk to mix well. Pour the melted butter, sugar, milk and egg mixture into the flour, add salt to make it salty and reduce the amount of sugar. Knead and mix slowly to make the scone dough. 2. Shaping. Use a rolling pin to roll the dough into 1 cm thick blocks, and then use a flat round mold with a diameter of 5 cm to press it into a round scone. 3. Bake. Place in a baking tray, brush a little beaten egg liquid on the surface of the cake, and bake in the oven until golden brown and cooked. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 486. Tea Leaves and Leaves. As Lorraine picked up her teacup, 1,163 meters away, Carmen was also picking up hers. The cup was a typical Spanish ceramic, known for its rich colors and bold contrasts. However, neither the body nor the glaze could match the exquisite smoothness of Oriental porcelain. Probably third-rate. Carmen quickly assessed the cup in her mind like a professional auction appraiser. Appearance, second-rate. Artistry, first-rate. Form, second-rate. Craftsmanship, third-rate. Glaze, third-rate. And overall rating, third-rate. The Spanish traditionally view porcelain as a medium of art. Rare figurines and ornaments often find their way into the collector's market, and their design and craftsmanship are highly sought after by Europe's upper classes. Tea sets, however, are high-end household items. In this area, Spanish ceramics, not to mention Oriental porcelain, are even more competitive than English bone china, which is made for everyday life. If the tea set isn't good enough, then what about the tea? Carmen gracefully lifted the cup and brought it to her nose, sniffing it gently. The aroma is strong but the flavor is shallow, the color rich but not translucent. This tea is hopeless. It's likely a local tea from Central America or the Caribbean, inferior even to the knockoff Kenyan tea produced and sold by the Lucy estate. At least the Lucy tea plants are genuine, first-rate strains imported from Kenya, while these teas. Carmen sighed softly, clinking her cup against her lips in a mock sip, then immediately set it down, not forgetting to dab her handkerchief at the corner of her mouth, as if she had actually drunk something. Mayor de Poigny, she said to the arrogant middle-aged man across from her, how have you considered the audience? Mayor de Poigny crossed his legs, his thick double chin lifted high. Audience. The president of your Chamber of Commerce wants to ask me to see the governor. He paused. Honestly, I don't quite understand why. Which why? Carmen asked. Why ask to see the governor? Or why ask to see the governor through you? The mayor was stunned. Commerce fell under the purview of City Hall. Ever since the American branch established the exchange in St. Augustine, he had met with Drake's business leaders more than once, first as exchange manager and later as branch manager. The impression Drake's managers gave him, at first, Their ambition and aggressiveness might have shocked him, but with more interactions, he realized, stripping away their Chamber of Commerce style, they were no different from ordinary managers. Or rather, merchants. True gentlemen shouldn't expect anything from those engaged in such menial professions. They were essentially cut from the same cloth, bullying their inferiors and flattering their superiors, forgetting the principles when it came to profit. Furthermore, the Drake Chamber of Commerce had an irreconcilable historical conflict with Spain. They had aided the British in their attack on Nicaragua, and the president, Lorraine Drake, had personally orchestrated the San Carlos tragedy, the scars of which remain unresolved to this day. Although the lure of tax revenues meant that most Caribbean colonies studiously avoided mentioning the San Carlos tragedy, no governor, with the exception of Nicaragua, had ever placed a Drake Chamber of Commerce on a list of prohibited traders. But an official, a gentleman, a noble person is considered noble because, beyond profit and political achievements, they always have a place in their hearts for pure justice. Precisely because of this inner commitment to justice, Drake's managers in St. Augustine are constantly forced to work harder for the same results. Setbacks have made them cautious and humble, and the mayor's image in the eyes of the Drake people has become increasingly aloof. Habits are like a terrifying demon. After years of both harassing and being harassed, even the mayor has grown accustomed to the assertive demeanor he initially used only against Drake, and the servile deference of merchants before him. He believes he has mastered the proper expression of justice and nobility in the face of wealth, even if today's visitor is Carmen Xavier, the legendary businesswoman hailed as Her Majesty Queen Xavier by countless in the upper echelons of society. But, a counter-question? Mayor de Poigny's first reaction was to counter-question, trying to find out whether Queen Xavier had taken the wrong medicine or forgotten it before leaving. Otherwise, how could a lowly businesswoman dare to question a noble mayor? He chuckled in anger. Come to think of it, although this is our first meeting, I've heard of Miss Xavier's renown. Is that so? Of course I am. You're a household name in society. I've heard of many ladies from prominent families imitating your makeup and clothing at balls. It's become a trend. I didn't expect you to know something about fashion. Carmen feigned surprise, covering her mouth. Or are these just topics of conversation between you and your daughter? Another counter-question. Mayor de Poigny wasn't surprised that Carmen knew about his daughter, but she was deeply bothered by the repeated questions. Because each question was a challenge. As a businesswoman, a guest, and a woman, Carmen constantly seized control of the conversation, and her timing was always perfect. The mayor had no way to fight back except to change the subject. The second time, the mayor was even angrier. Ms. Xavier, since you are so considerate, you must know what I am thinking right now, right, bitch, guest, woman, I guess. Carmen opened the fan, covered her mouth, and lightly revealed the scars in Mayor de Poigny's heart. You are wondering why the woman opposite you is so uneducated, why she doesn't know her duty to be humble, and why she always wants to seize the initiative in speaking? Looking at your expression now, I guessed right. Carmen giggled, and Carmen snapped the folding fan. Mr. Mayor, there is no need to rush to find a mirror now. Your expression management is not out of control, it's just that you are expressionless. In many cases, it is not the right choice to hide your mood. Mayor de Poigny's forward veins bulged. Ms. Xavier, it will do you no good to anger me. Don't forget that our governor is very busy. Florida has a young American brother to the north, the British who are eager to avenge their shame to the east, and the French pigs who are eyeing it covetously to the west. He is responsible for the safety of the entire Florida, and as his loyal subordinate, I see no reason, morally or logically, to help a lowly merchant infringe upon his precious time and interrupt his vital thoughts. Is that so? If we can only see the governor through your introduction, your judgment is truly impeccable. Carmen smiled, rising, lifting her skirt and bowing. Since you are so determined not to accept our kindness. Farewell, upright and just Mr. Mayor. Carmen truly left, leaving decisively, without a hint of hesitation. Mayor de Poigny sat strutting on the sofa, legs crossed, his thick double chin raised high, and watched his guest walk to the door with a comical expression. For the first time today, he finally felt the reality of his guests. A businessman, a woman, a perennial topic of conversation in high society, an idol adored by the ladies of noble families. Initially, she wondered whether she was wondering why the governor had requested an audience with him, or why she was going through him to ask for an audience with him. The mayor finally realized that this wasn't a rhetorical question, but a completely interrogative statement. She or her evil boss, The privateer Lorraine Drake who had destroyed San Carlos. They weren't businessmen, they were plutocrats. Plutocrats were undisputed, official members of high society, far more distinguished than ordinary gentlemen, even more so than most non-hereditary titles lacking history and heritage. This was why the governors had turned a blind eye to the tragedy in San Carlos. They had misunderstood the fundamental problem from the very beginning. Carmen was almost out of the room, her steps neither hurried nor slow, but there was no way she would stop. And so, why would someone as noble as she belittle herself for such an ignorant, lowly person? The noble were considered noble not only for their interests and social connections, but also because they always had a place for their pride. Xavier. Madam, Carmen paused, neither speaking nor turning back. As far as I know, the governor will be enjoying a rare vacation at the San Marcos coastal fortress tomorrow. If possible, could you give me the opportunity to introduce them? Tomorrow morning, at 10 a.m., I will accompany the president to the appointment promptly. Carmen opened her folding fan again, covering her mouth with her hands, her face filled with joy. I'll have some tea delivered shortly, Mr. Mayor. It may be a little different from the tea you're used to, but don't be surprised. That's the difference between tea leaves and tree leaves. Chapter 487 Fishing. The Spanish achieved many firsts in St. Augustine. It was the first European settlement in North America, the first colony, the first town, the first prison, the first emancipation of black people, the first dedicated wall and protection for people of color. Fort San Marcos, standing before Lorraine, was also a first. It was the first masonry fortress built on the North American continent. Fort San Marcos has a bloody and rich history. After Lorraine's ancestor Francis stormed and burned the town in 1586, the Indians learned from their experience and began increasingly resorting to fire attacks to undermine the fortress's defenses. To maintain their foothold in St. Augustine, the Spanish were forced to rebuild the town using non-flammable materials, ultimately completing the present-day Fort San Marcos in 1672. From its inception, the fortress held heavy expectations for the Spanish. They sought fireproofing, dug a moat, and constructed the main structure with concrete bricks made from shales, lime, and sand, reinforced with stronger bluestone in key areas. They wanted it to defend against pirates, so the fort was built on the Atlantic coast, on the outskirts of town. 4 large gun emplacements housed a total of 24 large-caliber coastal artillery pieces. They also wanted it to protect against Indians, so the traditional square walls were enhanced with massive diamond-shaped battlements at the corners, allowing the defenders to outflank the Indians no matter where they attacked. Castillo de San Marcos lived up to its builders' hopes. From 1672 to 1763, although the town of St. Augustine was destroyed several times, the fort remained undefeated. The Spanish musketeers fought 15 bloody battles here, winning all 15 of them. This preserved the vitality of St. Augustine and made it a trusted Noah's Ark for all the townspeople. The carriage stopped in front of the fort's portcullis. Lorraine jumped out, turned around, and helped Carmen down from the carriage. Today, Carmen chose a warm green, narrow-shouldered, bustle-style dress. The simple design was unadorned, with no hint of frills. Her pretty face was bare of makeup, and even her hair was simply tied up. The only traces of delicate embroidery on her dress accentuated her pure, innocent demeanor. This was truly un-Carmen. While Carmen usually kept her makeup to a minimum when appearing with Lorraine, that restraint often meant subduing her intelligence and highlighting her beauty. This simple, fresh look, at least in Lorraine's memory, seemed like a novelty. Lorraine had been trying to figure out Carmen's intentions, but now that they were about to meet their real boss, he finally couldn't help but ask, "Carmen, is that Governor Toulet obsessed with girls, daughter obsessed?" It took Carmen a moment to grasp Lorraine's meaning, and she rolled her eyes in surprise. "No, he's a fishing enthusiast and an amateur silk collector." Silk, Lorraine seemed to understand, and he reassessed Carmen's dress. Carl play with lotus flowers, egrets gaze at the sky. This seemingly plain dress is anything but plain at heart. If Lorraine's guess is correct, it's cut from a single piece of embroidered shoe brocade, omitting all other embellishments to preserve the integrity of the embroidery and its elegance. The little fox smiled like Carmen. "Did you see?" Lorraine nodded glumly. "I'm just curious, which came first, the dress or the embroidery? It was custom made." Carmen stuck out her tongue. 20 embroiderers in the Qing dynasty worked on it for 3 years, and my tailor has lived in Guangzhou for 3 years. Wow, with a perfunctory exclamation, Lorraine lifted her elbow and let Carmen take it. Together, they walked forward. Mayor de Puigny, the mayor of Fort San Agustin, who had introduced them to this meeting, was waiting outside the fortress's gate. "Welcome to the Immortal Fortress," he said. "The governor is waiting for you at the dock. Mayor, please lead the way." Carmen bowed. "It's my honor." The pier referred to the auxiliary pier of the San Marcos coastal fortress, primarily used to transport supplies and personnel into the castle when land access was blocked. Consequently, the pier was small, with only 2 plank roads and 4 medium-sized cargo berths. It was completely disconnected from the mainland and could only be accessed from within the castle. The 3 of them entered the castle, passing through a deep, over 15-meter thick doorway and a spacious, flat courtyard. Lorraine spotted the patrolling army on the city wall, dressed in red and blue robes, their uniforms neatly arranged. This seemed to be a first on Spanish soil. Lorraine couldn't help but sigh. "San Agustin is the most threatening Spanish town I've ever seen." Mayor de Puigny smiled and replied, "We've never forgotten our history. Every resident here knows the next war could come at any moment." He gestured to the courtyard below and said, "Every March, the whole town takes a day off. We organize evacuation drills here. Women, children, and the elderly set up tents in the courtyard, while men patrol the city walls. For us, it's as grand a holiday as Christmas. Please allow me to pay my respects to the residents of San Agustin." Lorraine bowed slightly. The 3 of them continued forward, passing through the courtyard again through the doorway and reaching the dock. From a distance, Lorraine spotted a sturdy middle-aged man, fishing rod in hand, concentrating intently on the seawall. He pulled and reeled in an irregular rhythm, lifting and pausing, the bobbin at the bottom of the rod slowly tightening, perfectly synchronizing the rhythm of the line. Mayor de Puigny wanted to step forward to report, but Lorraine stopped him, extending his index finger as a gesture for him to wait. The 3 of them waited by the seawall. After a while, the float on the fishing line suddenly sank, and the loose fishing line stretched straight. The middle-aged man became more and more focused, tightened the fishing rod, and slowly and steadily tightened the fishing line circle by circle. Splash! The hooked fish jumped out of the water, leaving a bright silver light in the sight, and quickly jumped back into the water. Lorraine saw the fish clearly. It was silver all over, with a dorsal fin with spots. The fish was at least 60 centimeters long, and its jumping movements were powerful and strong, and its hooked jaw was eye-catching. If Lorraine was not mistaken, this was a medium-sized, energetic Atlantic silver salmon. The fight between the fisherman and the fish lasted for about 15 minutes. The fish was exhausted and was finally pulled ashore. The fisherman, holding up his catch, smiled triumphantly at Lorraine. "President Drake, as a young man, you're more patient than most. I think I know the secret to your success. Waiting is certainly one of the secrets to my success, but it's by no means the only one." Lorraine looked at the various strange ornaments surrounding the fisherman and suddenly pressed the spring. With a clang, his parachute sword popped out. "This is the first time in my life that I've cooked for a guest. Sir Tusula, please give me this opportunity." Chapter 488. Guess the riddle. The sharp sword blade cut sideways at the position of the fish's fin, from the edge of the scales to the fish bone, and stopped. Lorraine drew out the sword, turned the fish over, and repeated the same method from the other side, cutting off the fish bone cleanly and neatly. The huge head of the silver salmon, along with the internal organs, was separated from the body of the fish as a whole, and was thrown into the sea by Lorraine. With a wave, it disappeared without a trace. The second step in killing a fish is to remove the scales. Unlike the delicate and smooth scales of other fish, the scales of salmon are thick and hard. The common scaling method is difficult to be thorough, and it will hurt the fish meat, which is not advisable. Lorraine held the sword and cut from the tail of the fish, feeling the strange touch from the handle, stopped when he found the gap between the fish skin and the fish meat, and slowly moved towards the fish head. It is conceivable that such delicate work is not suitable for an umbrella sword at all. Because the parachute sword adopts the typical shape of a slender sword, while it has a single-edged blade like a fish-cutting knife, its blade is narrow, thick, and a full meter long. But Lorraine had to make a difficult choice. Not only did he have to use his parachute sword to cut the fish, he also had to appear relaxed and cheerful, absolutely not damaging the fish, and certainly not allowing blood or other impurities to splatter on his pure white vest. A meeting is a game, and no one would engage in unnecessary gestures in such a formal setting. Therefore, Sir Tusula's every word and gesture must be related to the topic of the conversation. Lorraine's task was to solve the puzzle and accurately convey his answer in a way that suited the situation. It was an interesting game. The scene for the day was sea fishing. The seawall was covered with fishing gear, cooking utensils, seasonings, ingredients, a fish cutting knife, and other tools that might be used. So the first puzzle wasn't difficult to solve. Catch equals Miami. As he peeled the fish skin with his awkward parachute sword, Lorraine made malicious guesses in his mind. What if Sir Tusura still couldn't catch any fish today? How would this ingeniously planned meeting end? Cheating? Just as he was thinking about the key, Lorraine suddenly felt a lightness in his hand. The fish skin completely peeled away from the body, revealing the pink flesh, crisp and flawless. The second puzzle, the right to prepare the catch equals the right to develop Miami, and the cooking knife equals the armed force to defend the town. Tusura showed Lorraine his catch, confirming that all of Florida was Spanish territory. Lorraine's request to personally prepare the fish not only acknowledged and supported Spain's territorial rights over Miami, but also reminded him that the Drake Chamber of Commerce's acquisition of Miami was legal and recognized by all relevant nations and forces. Therefore, Tusura had no right to refuse Lorraine's request to prepare the fish, nor did he have any reason to attempt to change the status quo in the Miami region. The meeting thus moved on to the second topic. Tusura allowed Lorraine to prepare the salmon, offered to lend him a fish knife, and informed Lorraine that he intended to deploy troops to Lorraine's private territory. Lorraine drew his sword with a backhand. The Drake Merchants Guild is capable of protecting its own territory. Miami doesn't need Spanish soldiers. Sizzle. The fish skin was removed, and Lorraine pressed down on the flesh, cutting first from the back, then moving to the belly and cutting again. He neatly stripped the bones, leaving only 2 pieces of whole, pure flesh. Sir, do you like sweet and sour flavors? Lorraine asked with a smile. As long as it whets my appetite, I'll take anything, Sir Tusula replied. Lorraine wasn't surprised by the answer. He rinsed his sword with clean water, cleaning off any residue, then cleaned and peeled the rich fish flesh. He poured it into a glass bowl along with yogurt, onions, chopped cilantro, saffron, and vanilla, and marinated it thoroughly. As he began selecting willow branches in front of the oven, the atmosphere finally grew uncontrollably intelligent. The Sir himself knew nothing about cooking. After all, aristocratic tradition didn't require men to know how to cook. The ability to cook was always a matter of personal preference and experience. So, judging others by his own experience, even though he had prepared all the ingredients necessary to cook the salmon at the dock, as the chef had suggested, he was still convinced that all he would end up with was thinly sliced, pure, natural sashimi. But he had overlooked the fact that it was Lorraine who would be cooking the salmon today. As a seasoned sailor, how could he not know how to cook fish? Ahem. Captain Drake, what are you planning? A simple snack, smoked salmon balls. Smoked? The Sir rolled his eyes and, without a word, called out the names of the chefs lurking in the shadows. That's right. He had indeed intended to provoke Lorraine when he chose cooking as the format for today's puzzle, but that was simply because such a challenge would hold immense significance for Spain. If Lorraine gave up his right to dispose of the catch, or borrowed the Sir's fish knife, then according to the rules of the social game, Spain could legitimately reclaim the Miami region. It might sound childish, but world events are often decided in the midst of idle games, as they have always been. But Lorraine had foiled all his plans. Not only did he handle the situation with ease, he even threw a difficult question his way. If the Sir really allowed his guests to light fires and do odd jobs in front of him in their formal attire, he would become a complete joke in the social circle. After tonight, the family's reputation and past image would be gone forever, and 8 American bison wouldn't be able to restore them. This was a critical moment for the Tusula family's survival. At the Sir's command, a large group of chefs and servants emerged from every corner, their eyes wide with bloodthirsty intent, surrounding Lorraine, who was holding tinder, in 3 layers. Lorraine spread his hands in a helpless manner. Sir, I need some space. No one questions your control over this cooking, President. The salmon is yours. Tusula tried not to express his eagerness too obviously. But cooking takes a lot of time. You're the guest, so you can't do everything yourself, right? That being said, Lorraine pondered for a moment, then said with embarrassment, but if I ask your servants to help, wouldn't that go against my original intention of preparing delicious food for you? President, I think we can find some compromise that won't hurt the knight's goodwill while still satisfying your wishes. Carmen, who had been watching the fun from the sidelines, spoke at the perfect moment. As she spoke, She pulled an octagonal gold coin from her handbag and flicked it into the air with a ding. The coin tumbled in the sunlight, gleaming with golden light, arcing across the crowd, and bouncing accurately into Lorraine's palm. "Heir," Lorraine said with a cheerful smile. "Drake's abilities alone are limited, but I want to prepare this meal on my own. So, hiring some help is the best of both worlds." He said this, and without even considering the chef's wishes, he stuffed the newly acquired gold coins into the pocket of his chef's robe, patting it solemnly twice. "Since you've accepted my payment, Mr. Chef, I'll leave the rest to you." Chapter 489. It's time to eat. Incense curled up. Lorraine, freshly washed, Carmen, as elegant as ever, the knight, having changed his clothes, and the mayor, who had never understood the riddle, moved to the castle patio and settled in a shaded area. The overstaffed chefs were left to continue to work on the single, pitiful Atlantic coho salmon under the scorching sun on the dock. This meant the fun of the guessing game was over. If Sir Tussila hadn't prepared something more interesting, the next step would be the final negotiation. In the shade of the wall, the four sat in a row, Lorraine and Tussila in the center, Carmen to Lorraine's right, and the mayor to Tussila's left. After the four of them sat down, Sir Tussila suddenly said, "President, you've been drifting on the sea all year round. You shouldn't be used to the heat on land, right? It's true that there aren't many opportunities to spend the summer on land," Lorraine recalled for a moment. "Since I went to sea at the age of 8, it's probably no more than 3 summers, going to sea at the age of 8, the knight repeated with emotion. "De what were you doing when you were 8 years old? Memorizing the Bible?" Mayor de answered without hesitation. "When I was young, my father wanted me to become a pastor, so I started memorizing the Bible at the age of 6, and because I memorized it well, I was successfully selected for the Young Faith Choir. It's a pity that I prepared carefully for this for 4 years, but on the day of the gatekeeper election, I fell ill and was bedridden. The priest thought that this was God's rejection of my service, so he sent me back home. After that, I started to study and engage in politics." "That's a sad story." Tussila laughed with his old face shameless, and while laughing, he did not forget to bring Lorraine along. "President, do you hear that? De live the childhood a child of civilized nations should have, embracing the Bible and singing praises of heaven. Only you crazy English people would go out and fight the wind and waves at that age. You're rushing to heaven. Familiarizing yourself with the path to heaven from a young age is the key to staying on the path of life in adulthood, sir. This is the creed that England cultivates its youth, and it's also the secret weapon that makes Britain strong. Isn't piracy the secret weapon that makes Britain strong?" The words fell, and the air suddenly thickened. Such blunt sarcasm, coming from a man of Sir Tussila's stature, left even Lorraine unsure how to respond. Should he sarcastically respond? This old man, is he a fool pretending to be wise, or a wise fool? Lorraine stared intently at Tussila, and Carmen also stared at Tussila. Mayor de Puigny's face flushed red, his expression a subtle mixture of wanting to cheer and trying to make amends. Unfortunately, just like his ultimate failure to become a priest, neither cheer nor atonement was within his grasp. Lorraine chuckled. "Sir, you're truly insightful. 200 years ago, my ancestors plundered these oceans, and 200 years later, I'm back to plunder these oceans again. So, Britain's destiny is indeed closely tied to piracy, but we're no longer disruptors of order. We create order and become its staunchest defenders." Tussila immediately grasped the hidden meaning in Lorraine's words. "President Drake is trying to tell me Spain is in decline." No, 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 Lorraine waved his hands away. "In my mind, Spain has never been strong. You're just good at getting ahead of others, then quickly stopping and throwing away your advantage without hesitation." The air was thick with tension, so thick that Carmen and de Poigny could almost see sparks drifting. This conversation had already deviated from the proper reserve and politeness of a gentleman. The best thing to do now was to stop, calm down, and make concessions. However, as the two's companions, Carmen and de Poigny, both Spanish, were unable to intervene in this debate between nations. They could only watch helplessly as the conversation deteriorated. Sir Tussela's eyes narrowed, a threatening glint glimmering through them. "President Drake, you enjoy adventure, don't you?" "Very much." Lorraine paused. "Whenever I face a fork in the road, I always firmly believe that the risk is proportional to the reward, but too much risk often leads to a dead end. My familiarity with the path to heaven since childhood has kept me on the path of life in my adult life. Sir, I will definitely not choose a dead end." Strange confidence, The threat in Tusula's eyes suddenly dissipated, replaced by a growing admiration. Speak frankly, my excellent young man. It is impossible for Spain to establish a town on British land. Even if this matter can bring considerable benefits to me personally, it will only bring disaster to my motherland. Your concerns are groundless. When Drake purchased the Miami area, Florida was still a British colony. Now that Britain has handed it over to Spain, Spain has the right to establish a town there. Your argument is evading the important issues. It is God's will that private property is sacred and inviolable. This means that when Florida is returned to our country, your Miami will become a dispute between the two countries. The war may not happen immediately, but when it really happens, the only one who will be hurt is Spain. Your concerns are groundless. My transactions with the Indians have been reported to Britain, Spain and the United States at the same time, and I have paid taxes 3 times for the same piece of land. From the perspective of property rights, my Miami can be regarded as Britain's Miami, as well as the United States and Spain's Miami. This is not a dispute, it is shared. Are you threatening me? You want to say that if I don't appoint a mayor for you, you will go to the United States and Britain to find your mayor? Let me tell you, this will bring you complete destruction, and Spain will never accept such bullying. It is obvious that you have been misinterpreting my goodwill. Every word I said was to find a legitimate explanation for Spain to avoid disputes. What's more, if I really wanted to trample on Spain's sovereignty, I should be preparing for war in the Bay of Biscay instead of scheming with you here, bold boy, stubborn old thing, humph, tisk. Oh, without any signs, the conversation suddenly became tense, and then took a turn on the edge of collapse. The two people exchanged sharp words on the topic, and the wonderful debate was at its climax. Who knew that before the result came out, the shrew started cursing? What on earth? For the first time, Carmen didn't know how to cooperate with Lorraine's topic. She looked at the poor mayor pitifully, and actually saw the sparkling tears in the mayor's eyes. Tears. Carmen suddenly had an idea. President, the smoke at the dock has dissipated. Since the negotiations can't produce any results for the time being, should we adjourn for a while and go taste the smoked fish balls that you and the Lord have collaborated on? Yes. Smoked fish balls. Mayor de Pliny was so excited that tears streamed down his face. Sir, it's time to eat. Chapter 490 Volunteering. Tisk. So difficult. The heated talks came to a break. Although the gathering place was moved back to the dock and the Chinese dishes were basically ready, it still took time to set the table. Carmen was aiming for this little bit of free time. Taking advantage of the gap, Lorraine and Tusula, who were at loggerheads, were finally separated artificially. Carmen stood with Lorraine at the end of the plank road, gazing at the boundless Atlantic Ocean and listening to Lorraine's rare youthful complaints. However, there was actually nothing to complain about. Knowing the basics made this confrontation easily reveal the nature of bargaining in Lorraine's eyes. Everything was a means and the arguments were all performances. After complaining for a while, Lorraine took a deep breath and calmed down. Carmen took a step closer and whispered, "The Sir insisted on repurchasing the land as a prerequisite for establishing a town in Miami. If we don't give in, today might be. I'm not a stingy person." Lorraine snorted again, but a successful transaction requires mutual investment. Unilateral concessions aren't business, they're surrender. The old man is too greedy. Municipal administration, customs, taxation, public security, justice, and perhaps even defense. If I want to completely eliminate Miami's political disputes, I have to hand all of this over to him. What does the transfer of these rights mean? If converted into land, it would be the entire Bayou town, most of Miami Beach, and the entirety of the strategically important South Biscay Islands. Captain, Carmen hesitated for a long time. I must remind you that if this negotiation fails, then given Sir Tusula's consistent stubbornness, we won't have another chance to establish a town until a new governor arrives. A warm breeze blew in from the far end of the Atlantic, rippling the sea. In the distance, flying fish leaped out of the water, forming groups and strings of them, gleaming silver in the sunlight and forming beautiful ribbons. So we can't give in, Lorraine said calmly. Florida, it had the best chance to rise 30 years ago. Ms. Aquila from the office told me that at that time, Fort Mose was beginning to take shape, and Spain's policy towards blacks impressed the Indians, bringing an end to centuries of racial hatred. 3 times in a row, the Spanish, blacks, and Indians joined hands to defend Fort St. Augustine and jointly repelled the British attacks. This atmosphere of shared hatred made Spain see the prospect of developing Florida, and there was even a wave of immigration from mainland Europe. However, Spain's economic structure was so bad that before this wave of enthusiasm could spread to the capital sector, in 1763, the Spanish lost the 7 Years' War as a bonus and were forced to hand over Florida to Britain. Fort Moses' development momentum was suppressed, and the Indians felt they had been betrayed. The British got the coveted Florida, but found that their country's interest in this land was not even as great as that in cold Canada. There's nothing here except fish and savages. That's what the first British governor said about Florida. His words dealt a devastating blow to the already limited enthusiasm on the British Isles. The reason we were able to take over the entire Miami area with the support of the authorities was, to put it bluntly, because this land was worthless in their eyes. Then, it's now. America's independence finally allowed Spain to win back a city. They took back Florida, but found that things and people had changed. Most of the chiefs who supported them back then are dead, and the few who are still alive are very old. The young generation is still wary of white people, the culture is mixed, people's hearts are divided, and racial conflicts are sharp and harsh. Britain's 21 years of inaction destroyed the Spanish people's centuries of painstaking efforts. Even the country's yearning for Florida disappeared due to the further deterioration of the economic environment. The Spanish nobles knew that they had lost the best opportunity to develop this land. As the new governor, Sir Tussera and his followers must also understand why they won the election among a group of competitors. They are excellent soldiers, strict with themselves, and proud. Under their leadership, the Florida Army is undoubtedly the elite in the Spanish army system in the entire New World, but they have no talent for local management. In 1784, the total tax revenue of the 6 towns in Florida was less than £30,000. After cutting the 50% that was remitted to the mainland, the annual fiscal revenue of the governor's office was less than £15,000. And what about Miami? Miami Beach opened as a port in April 1984. The transaction tax in the first 8 months was £3,362. With 26 days left in the second 8 months, the transaction tax has reached £8,957. It is a foregone conclusion that the total revenue will exceed $10,000 in 1785. Miami implements a free port system and does not have customs. The commercial tax is 3 percentage points lower than the Florida standard, at only 4%. Even under these conditions, I am still confident that Miami's finances can reach the total of the 6 towns in Florida within 3 years. This is the difference between businessmen and soldiers. Lorraine bit the last word heavily. Compared to setting up a government office and building a town, is Tussera's asking price high? To be honest, it is not high. Of the 4 towns that have already started operating, Bayou Town, Academy Town, Jackdaw Town, and Miami Beach, only Academy and Jackdaw Town are truly closely related to the development of the Chamber of Commerce. Bayou is an immigrant town, and who is in charge has no impact on us. Miami Beach is a port area, and the administrative income is insignificant in our entire profit system. Even if we add the other 6 planned towns, the 2 manufacturing towns related to industry that we need to retain control over are actually the only ones. The Chamber of Commerce is not a kingdom. We don't need extra land to feed our people and grow food, nor do we need to work hard to produce all our raw materials. Abandoning downstream self-sufficiency is a foolish decision for the Chamber of Commerce. From a cost-effectiveness perspective, it's not worth the cost for us to independently operate a comprehensive large city. However, this does not mean that we can hand over the land we have already acquired to the Spanish. Tussera is a warrior. The nature of a warrior is greed. Easy gains will not make him grateful to us. It will only whet his appetite and make him think he can have whatever he wants from us. For the sake of long-term cooperation in the future, this is an illusion that must be avoided, but he is too poor. Lorraine's expression was indescribably depressed. If he buys back, how much money can he come up with? How much land can he buy back? If there is less land, he is unwilling to bear the subsequent political risks. If there is more land, we are back to the previous problem. This is what annoys me. The old guy rolls on the ground without any shame and pushes all the problems to me to solve. Can you imagine? The great chivalrous spirit of Spain can actually cultivate such a scoundrel. Just now, I really wanted to bring Catalina here, so that she can see with her own eyes what her beloved country has degenerated into. Carmen laughed. She really couldn't get enough of Lorraine's childish side. Captain, Carmen smiled and hooked Lorraine's little finger. Catalina can't get out of bed yet. And even if her injury is healed, she probably won't be able to understand the knight's secret code. Right, I can explain it to her in pieces like I did just now. That should be quite difficult. Carmen pouted. I remember when the 10 towns plan came out, the most excited person on the board was Catalina. Her knights' minds are all about expanding territory. They definitely can't understand why we would use the land we have gained to exchange for an empty mayor. Lorraine glared at Carmen unhappily. I'm not so sure that you would comfort yourself by slandering your companions. I'm telling the truth. Carmen let go of Lorraine's hand, pressed her skirt and took a half step back. Captain, I have an idea. Huh? I never took the lead when we worked together. I think today might be a good opportunity. You take the lead. A picture suddenly emerged in Lorraine's mind. Carmen was wearing dazzling high heels, holding a folding fan in her hand, and stepping on the governor. While that was undoubtedly a stream of consciousness fantasy, Carmen's offensive drive during negotiations was indeed far stronger than Lorraine's. This also made her unsuitable for leading from a weak position, and both Carmen and Lorraine knew this. Carmen actually volunteered. Lorraine's eyes lit up. You mean, a feint? I'd rather just go straight to the point. But if the other side is a rogue governor, I don't think it's going to go that smoothly, is it? Chapter 491. A dazzling variety. After a while, dinner was served. Lorraine pulled out a chair for Carmen, watched her put on the dining table, and then took his own seat. A long table sat in front, covered with a snow-white tablecloth. 2 silver candlesticks sat in the center, and dazzling silver cutlery, knives, forks, spoons, and plates were evenly spaced around the candlesticks, each taking its proper place. Sir Tusula sat at the head of the table, Lorraine opposite him. Mayor de Puini sat alone on the left wing, facing Carmen across the table. The head chef, dressed in white, walked solemnly to the Lord's side, lifted the silver lid, and gently rang the bell. Ding ding ding. That was the signal for the food to be served. The servants filed in, carrying trays to the table. First came a small dish of boiled green beans. The emerald green beans nestled like plum pearls in one corner of the dish. In the other corner, a plate of cheese and a small pot of salt were placed. Next came the smoked fish balls, a key feature of the day. Smoked salmon fillets, delicately rolled into hydrangeas, rested delicately on either side of golden brown French toast, each protecting a small spoonful of vibrant black caviar in the center. The third dish served was the seafood disc. Served in a wide-bottomed, wide-rimmed bowl, the thick white broth complemented the pinkish red shrimp, the smooth fish fillet, and the vibrant greens of lettuce, cilantro, and carrots. The fourth course was Spain's renowned saffron seafood risotto. Again, a shallow spoonful, it was adorned with a variety of local seafood, its rich aroma irresistible to the taste buds. The fifth course was the black pepper ribeye steak. Lightly charred onions and broccoli garnished one side of the steak like a puzzle, while a hearty fried egg with a swaying yolk sat on the other. A plum steak lay quietly between the two, seared on both sides for medium rare. A deep brown sauce poured from the center of the steak, soaking the bottom of the vegetables and eggs, emitting a unique aroma. After the steak was served, 2 waiters worked together to bring a basin of chopped tomatoes as big as a wash basin from a cart. Although it looked somewhat processed, it was far from enough to constitute a complete salad. A chef came out and silently bowed first to Sir Tusula, then to Lorraine and the head chef. After that, he took a palm-sized, cleaned blue mussel from the cart and pried it open in front of Lorraine. He stuffed it with cilantro puree, goat cheese, olive oil, and a sprinkle of pepper. Finally, he scooped a spoonful of the chopped tomatoes from the large bowl into a beautiful flower pattern, kept it half open, and poked it into a wide-mouthed square glass. He then placed it on Lorraine's table along with a lemon and salt shaker. After Lorraine, it was Carmen. After Carmen, it was the mayor. After the mayor, it was the knight. Once the chef had finished preparing all 4 blue mussel and tomato salads, the bread server arrived with a large basket of freshly baked croissants, gently placing them in the corresponding glass basin. Ding-ling-ling. The chef rang the bell to signal the end of the meal, and the winemaid filled everyone's glasses with champagne. The knight smiled and raised his glass. Brindamus, brindamus pour la. Everyone drank in unison. Carmen was torn. Although she had mentally prepared to launch an attack on the road, although she had already carefully planned her attack plan and entry points. There's a saying, when everything is under control, unexpected things happen. The knight's lunch was surprisingly meager. Modern aristocrats and wealthy individuals favor luxury, whether in clothing, food, housing, or transportation. A return to simplicity is a matter of taste. Even within the upper echelons of society, Carmen is a renowned icon of taste. She lives within her means, pouring her exorbitant annual dividends into the marketplace and auction houses, buying a variety of items rarely seen even by the aristocracy. These items, cloaked in a befittingly common guise, are then used in her daily life. This earned her the reputation of Queen of Society. This distinction, while simultaneously reflecting her unrivaled social career, also contrasts with another Queen of Versailles, Marie Antoinette, the epitome of luxury, the wife of deficit. Years of extravagant spending have honed Carmen's exceptionally strong sense of taste. Once anything passes her hand, she instinctively traces its origins, accurately ascertaining even meaningless details like ingredients and value. Take, for example, this lunch. The silver plate was old. Judging by the patterns on the edges, it must have been made by a craftsman with neither talent nor fame. It was rarely used by the owner, and thanks to rough but diligent care, it maintained its at first glance, brand new appearance. The dishes on the silver plate were also unremarkable. The green beans were plump but of varying sizes. The caviar wasn't even top-notch, it lacked a golden sheen and wasn't plump or clear. It was definitely not the high-end Russian treasure. Moreover, Carmen had noticed before the dish arrived that the chef was plating the caviar with a silver spoon. Caviar should never come into contact with metal, as metal severely detracts from its aroma. It should usually be served on a crystal plate with a shell spoon, but the night chef clearly didn't understand this. The seafood bisque and seafood risotto were both quite flawed. Steak wasn't a high-end ingredient, but even so, the sirloin steak, judging by its fat content, didn't appear to be from cattle raised for food. Who knows which dairy cow had been struck by this unfortunate fate? Blue mussel and tomato salad was Carmen's favorite salad, but Greek goat cheese was difficult to transport, and the thousands of kilometers of sea voyage gave this ordinary dish a golden touch. This common sense wasn't even on the minds of the night chefs. What was Greek goat cheese? Was it as fresh as the sheep cheese from a Florida ranch? And champagne. Carmen knew Lorraine's wine preferences. What was that maid holding? St. Augustine Old Cellar? And so on. The chefs numbered over a dozen, and all the ingredients were already prepared. Why, with all that preparation, were they piling everything on the guests? Was it a hint for them to eat quickly and travel peacefully? Or perhaps the chefs knew their skills weren't enough to sustain a banquet, so they were relying on sheer quantity, completely spoiling the guests' appetites with a mountain of visuals? Everything is social. At such a formal and important social occasion, Carmen couldn't understand why these chefs would be so dignified, and even less did she understand why Sir Tussila insisted on doing so. What on earth could it be? Suddenly, Carmen's mind flashed back to the cup of tea leaves she'd had at the town hall yesterday. Until just now, she'd been convinced the mayor had deliberately arranged for inferior tea to express his disapproval. But what if this wasn't intentional, and the mayor, or perhaps the knight and his cronies, were completely clueless? Blindly pursuing the appearance of social grace, trying to project a seemingly plausible aura, yet financially strapped for cash, he'd been forced to settle for second best, ultimately becoming inferior. If that were the case, Carmen would have wanted to shed a tear of emotion for the night, not for anything else, but simply because this pursuit of taste was so inspiring, so inspiring. Finally, a fatal flaw had been revealed in the knight's impeccable rogue facade. Lorraine must have noticed it too. Carmen glanced at Lorraine subtly, easily finding the mark in his expressionless social demeanor. Lorraine's pinky finger, which should have been extended, was now slightly bent, gripping the fork. Then, Carmen whispered to Lorraine in her heart. Charged Captain Carmen Xavier, boarding. Chapter 492 Carmen, boarding. The atmosphere at the dinner table was restrained and harmonious. While this should be the most normal atmosphere at a social dinner, how can I put it, it felt too normal. This was Sir Tussila's true feelings. Falby von Tussila, born Falby Serra, was the third son of an ordinary landowner family in the Girona region of Spain. He was the best among his peers in the village, gifted with courage, a quick mind, and incredible strength. In hero-worshipping Spain, he was a natural-born hero. However, Spain's corrupt social structure doomed him to failure. His so-called exceptional talent only allowed him to attend elementary school for 3 more years than other bastards and second sons, barely enough to achieve literacy. At the age of 12, his family ceased supporting his education. Unwilling to waste his life on the farm, he bravely entered the selection process for the local Viscount's Guard. He was selected from a group of adults and became the personal guard of the Viscount's bastard, Master Oregon. Oregon was his first benefactor. The sons of European nobles were expected to take responsibility for their own lives, especially second sons like Oregon, who would not hesitate to gamble their lives for their future. It was Oregon who brought him from Spain to Mexico when he was young. Because of his talent and close connections, he secured him a rare commission as a corporal, allowing him to enter the army and become the youngest line drum major in Oregon's company. It took him a full 14 years to advance from drum major to sergeant, and from corporal to staff sergeant. At the age of 27, Staff Sergeant Falby Serra, line sergeant, faced a life-changing battle, the Tuxpan Rebellion. Over 2,000 Indians, taking advantage of the division commander's patrol, besieged the fort garrisoned by Oregon's company. The siege lasted for over 3 months, inflicting heavy casualties on the division commander's guard and Oregon's battalion, with 107 men, including the company commander, killed. In this battle, Falby Serra's loyalty and bravery deeply impressed General Xavier, then the divisional commander. Xavier became his second benefactor, marking the beginning of a decade of remarkable success. From 1766 to 1776, Falby Serra achieved a remarkable 42 victories in battles involving 300 or more men, achieving a remarkable 42 victories. He served as company commander of Line Corps, battalion commander, grenadier battalion commander, and artillery commander. Ultimately, he plunged headfirst into the turbulent waves of the Mexican War of Independence as colonel of the 207th Regiment, a prominent member of the Mexican colonial army, becoming one of Spain's most active military forces in this epic conflict. At the war's end, General Xavier was promoted to Count and appointed Governor-General of Mexico. With the Count's recommendation, Falby Serra became Governor-General of Florida and, for his meritorious service, was awarded the title of Baron, completing his ascent from commoner to aristocrat. His title was Baron Tuxpan, a life baron of the Kingdom of Spain. To highlight his achievements, he not only added the von symbolizing nobility to his name, but also combined his surname with his title, resulting in the current governor of Florida, His Excellency Baron Falby von Tuxpan. This shows that, despite being a noble, Tuxpan fell far short of true nobility, both in terms of life experience and intellectual attainments. He could not blend into the upper circles of the New World, and the sons of the nobility were unwilling to serve him. In the 6 towns under his command, including Mayor de Puini, who is present today, the only people he trusted and entrusted with important positions were civilian elites who had been promoted from the military. For a group that had effectively infiltrated high society and wielded a degree of secular power, this was undoubtedly a tragedy. Sir Tussila went to great lengths to change his appearance. Not only did he demand that he and his subordinates conform to aristocratic standards, he also cultivated the ridiculous persona of an amateur silk collector. He even allocated funds from his limited treasury to support the women of each family in their pursuit of expensive fashions. Yet, even so, he constantly made a fool of himself with his etiquette. The more clueless he became, the more sensitive he became, and the more sensitive he became, the more nervous he became. The notions of family reputation and past image, those concepts that never existed, initially used only to mock himself, had taken root in his mind without him even realizing it, and now they were indistinguishable from reality. That was why he considered Lorraine and Carmen's normality completely abnormal. In his self-awareness, he knew there must be a flaw in his etiquette. Even if he couldn't figure out where, it was there. However, Lorraine said nothing. He leisurely cut into the steak, devouring the meat and the vegetables. He picked up a piece of bread and soaked up every last drop of the soup. Then he set the empty plate aside and replaced it with green beans, praising their perfect cooking without even starting to eat. Carmen was like that too. This renowned fashionista, rumored to spend tens of thousands of pounds annually on extravagant hobbies and with no regard for the common people, was absorbed in her seafood dish. She savored it, sipped it for a long time, and savored it again, leaving a lingering aftertaste. Her posture was undoubtedly perfect, the straight shoulders, the raised fingers, the angle and speed with which she held a spoon, so perfect that Tussila wanted to summon all the wives of the officials in the governor's palace to watch and learn from them. But was the broth really that delicious? Could broths hand-caught by soldiers and cooked by half-hearted Spanish chefs truly captivate such a refined world-class palate? Tussila had misjudged a crucial point, the gap between her persona and reality. Carmen is a seafarer, and fashion icon is her core role within Lorraine's team. After self-evaluation, she's found the perfect persona that best reflects her own value and can best help Lorraine. But a seafarer is a seafarer. She spends most of each year with Lorraine at sea, where the weather is unpredictable, and Wang, the chef, is a mediocre cook. Given the circumstances, she can drink boiled, filtered seawater and eat moldy bread without resistance, and she eats plenty. Ultimately, it's just a high-level acting skill. In combat mode, Carmen finished her salty, thick broth, reached for some water, and signaled her attendant maid to replace it with seafood risotto. I wonder if it's my imagination, Mr. Mayor. Can't stand seafood. Not that I can't, but why can't you make any chewing noises? Mayor de Pryany roared in his heart, but by the time the roar passed through the barriers of his heart and surfaced on the surface, not even a bubble could be seen, leaving only a choked sigh that was about to be spoken. Carmen put on a look of homesickness on her face and smiled sadly. Where's the mayor from? Me. De Pryany showed a reminiscent expression. She is deep in the mountains of Costa Europa in Cantabria. It is called Ureno. It is a small mountain village with only 90 people and cliffs everywhere. My mother is very good at making cheese, so we raise 10 goats at home. My father sold the extra cheese in his grocery store, but it was almost never sold. He shrugged. The women in Ureno all make goat cheese. I firmly believe that my mother's cheese is the most delicious, and the neighbors also think they have the most delicious delicacy in the world. I know this feeling. Carmen's smile was particularly sweet at this moment. Soria is also such a magical place. There is obviously nothing, but every time I recall her grassy slopes and streams, my heart is like filled with honey. That sweet feeling often lasts for days or even months. Yes, the mountains and rivers of my hometown have, sizzle. De Pryany's sigh was interrupted by a sharp scrape as Sir Tussela's knife sliced through the glaze of his plate, though he seemed oblivious. Isn't Manager Xavier a noble, sir? That's truly rude. Carmen put down her water glass, a charming look on her face. The Drake Chamber of Commerce has direct descendants of the Earl of Braid in England, the beloved daughter of the Count of Barcelona in Spain, the second heir to the Viscount d'Essex in France, and even our president, an outstanding gentleman cultivated by Drake for 200 years, but that's not who I am. Unlike their nobility, I was born in my father's mill. I'm just an ordinary village girl. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 493 No Money No Dream. Carmen Xavier was a village girl. That Carmen Xavier, executive director of the Drake Chamber of Commerce, helms an asset management company, a fashion icon in the New World, a social queen in the Caribbean, hailed as the most outstanding woman in Spain in the past 30 years, even rivaled by Her Majesty the Queen of France. Was she actually a village girl? Sir Tussela suspected he might have suffered from heatstroke, a condition so deep-rooted that no medicine could cure it. Otherwise, with his hearing, how could he have misheard La Princesa, princess, as una chica de pueblo, village girl? Just like the two identities themselves, the two words didn't bear the slightest resemblance. Or, was Carmen Xavier really a village girl? What had happened to this young girl to cause such a complete transformation of her soul? Was it a miracle from God? Tussela looked at de Pryany in shock, who was looking back at him with the same expression. The light in their eyes burned brighter than the sun. Shock a minority, while hope dominated. De Pryany tried hard to extricate himself from the complex emotions. Ms. Xavier, I'm sorry, where did you say you were born? Soria, or more precisely, a peaceful Castilian village on the outskirts of Soria. Then why did you leave your hometown? De Pryany racked his brains for words. I don't mean anything else. I just think that a young and beautiful woman like you will often choose a more stable life. I understand, Mr. Mayor. Carmen smoothed her hair and smiled softly. Let me think about it. When should I answer this question? As you said, selling your beautiful daughter for a high price for a stable life is indeed the responsible choice of most parents, and my parents are no exception. I am very beautiful. When I was a child, many people told me that I was the most beautiful flower nurtured by the mountains and waters of Castile. My parents wanted me to marry into the most distinguished baron family in Soria, perhaps as the second son or perhaps as a bastard. So I had a tutor when I was very young. She was the secretary of the city hall, a kind of knowledgeable old woman. It's a pity that when I was 10 years old, my father went bankrupt. We had no food or clothing back home, and I was too young to sell for a good price. So my parents took me to Victoria, to live with my mother's wealthy, distant relatives. That's how I left home." Carmen was surprisingly candid, but even so, Tusela and Depoyani didn't hear anything they wanted to hear. Tusela wanted to join the interrogation himself, but Lorraine was across from him, devouring his lunch with impeccable table manners like an emotionless, gluttonous person. If Lorraine didn't move, he couldn't move either. It was the etiquette of the nobility, the law of the jungle on the battlefield. He could only give Depoyani a look. Depoyani understood, and without a word, he forced the conversation from the Atlantic to the depths of the Pacific. "Miss Xavier, my daughter has always admired you. Last night, she heard we were meeting today and insisted I convey her wishes to you. She wants to be a noble and charming lady like you, but she's lost and doesn't know how to strive for it. Can you give her some advice?" Pertinent, guiding advice. Lorraine, busy battling with her seafood risotto, nearly choked to death at Depoyani's clumsy request. Carmen had exerted her strength, through deliberate and unintentional guidance, perfectly seizing her opponent's weakness. Even Lorraine had heard the jokes about the Florida ruling group in social circles. He had always assumed those jokes were full of the malicious and exclusive nature of the upper class. After all, Tusera's life was a real-life interpretation of Spanish chivalric novels, and envy was only natural. But now it seemed that the nobles who spread the gossip were simply paragons of humility and kindness. Their glorification had caused Lorraine to overlook the significance of Tusera's upstart status. Fortunately, it was not too late to mend the fence after the sheep had been lost. Lorraine swallowed a risotto in his mouth, piled the empty plates on top of each other, and turned his attention to the smoked salmon balls that had been the focus of the talks. Carmen smiled brightly under Depoyani's gaze. "I'm glad to hear such an ambitious young lady's wish, although my own accomplishments are far from enough to serve as a role model for others," she said. "If you don't mind, as someone who's been through it, I'd like to help your daughter avoid some detours." "I'm all ears." Carmen thought for a moment. The development of accomplishment requires unremitting learning, persistent perseverance, and the courage to innovate. These three are the foundation, and none of them can be missing or replaced. Depoyani was dumbfounded. He didn't control his mouth for a moment and asked, "It has nothing to do with money." "Money?" Carmen looked around harmlessly, her eyes finally resting on the thick walls of Fort San Marcos. "I heard that Fort San Marcos has the strongest defenses on the entire East Coast, and it has repelled thugs who coveted it countless times. So, the beaches of St. Augustine must have the most and hardest shells in the world, right?" "Sorry, I didn't hear you clearly. You just said that San Marcos is strong because of shells, isn't it?" "It certainly isn't." Carmen's voice and eyes suddenly grew cold, a chill that bit her bones. "Shells aren't the reason for a city's defenses, they're the raw material. Money isn't a prerequisite for a refined lady, it's the raw material. There's a saying in the social world. 8,000 guineas, Spanish octagonal gold coins, with an exchange rate of 8 to 1 against a British pound, let you see society. 16,000 are your ticket to speaking, 32,000 keep a lady relevant, and 64,000 create a star on the dance floor. A lady is a work of art cast in gold, but that's the craftsman's job. When she's on display, the audience only cares about her artistry. Artistry is the sole criterion for determining her value." Carmen, completely in tune with her rhythm, raised her glass of water to salute Lorraine. Lorraine paused and nodded in return. "My president once told me that everything in this world is a business, whether it's running a country or cultivating a lady. The money invested is the cost, the performance at the ball is the product, and the reputation accumulated over time cultivates value, and the level of value determines profit and loss. For example, the Lord is a seasoned silk collector, so he should have noticed my dress today, right?" "No." Tusela's soul trembled behind his sturdy body. He had no idea what was going on with Carmen's dress, and he was no veteran silk collector. He had created this persona by chance because he happened to have a seemingly priceless folding screen among his trophies. But he had neither the money nor the knowledge to actually collect it. It was all a sham. Tusela knew his own worth, while Carmen hadn't at first, but after a day of interaction, she had already guessed the significance of this amateur silk collector. Shoe brocade and shoe embroidery are both artistic treasures from the East, but they are actually not suitable for cutting dresses. Especially shoe embroidery. If you accidentally cut its stitches, even the most exquisite embroidery will become worthless. Until an unexpected reading, I read from a scattered travelogue of the East that the embroiderers in the Qing dynasty would add exquisite embroidery to their wedding gowns. It turns out that as early as 1,000 years ago, They had already begun to customize the highest-end clothing, so I sent my tailor to the Qin dynasty. A travelogue, 3 years, 30 embroiderers, a cost of £3,000, and 24,000 gold coins. In the end, all these things were combined into this plain and unremarkable dress, just to get a moment of heartfelt appreciation from someone like the knight who understands silk on an occasion like today. This is the social cultivation of a lady. This is the social cultivation of a lady? As soon as these words came out, Tussauds' curled-up soul really throbbed as Carmen said. That thrill had nothing to do with noble things like appreciating art. It was simply pure, almost overwhelming, glitter from the side of 24,000 gold coins piled together. 24,000 gold coins for one dress? If you strip away the other metals, that's a full 22.5 kilograms of pure gold? And what a ridiculous level of refinement, it had nothing to do with money. Tussaud finally saw the true nature of the high society he'd always sought. No money, no dreams, a poor man can't even dream. He still vividly remembered his first week in office, when his wife had her first high-end dress custom-made for a ball. That dramatic, lace-embellished, deep purple gown cost him 170 octagonal gold coins, equivalent to 3 months' salary as colonel, and it gave him his first taste of the governor's splendor. Such a large expense actually had a corresponding official account. He'd been smug about it for a long time, but who could have known that joy, now fading into a bittersweet irony. 170 coins, 24,000 coins. This was the social graces of a lady. Tussauds laughed bitterly, and suddenly heard Lorraine's voice. "Thank you, sir, for a delicious lunch." He wiped his mouth, his hands filled with empty plates. "The break is over, can we get down to business now?" Chapter 494 Who Needs Miami? Tussauds couldn't fathom Lorraine's thoughts, unsure whether his well-timed interruption was motivated by goodwill, a desire to avoid embarrassing his host, or a malicious attempt to exploit his misfortune. But whatever his motive, Tussauds refused. The sumptuous, but careless lunch ended hastily, and Lorraine was the only one who devoured the food in front of him, leaving the rest barely touched. The servants cleared the plates and replaced them with coffee. The chef came up to express his gratitude, and Lorraine politely handed over a tip, bringing the satisfied drama to a close. The same short table for 4 remained, but the atmosphere was drastically different. Before dinner, Tussauds, with his impeccable rogue facade, dominated, and Lorraine found no flaws. A hero with a heart for his country is invincible, as always. Later, Carmen launched a special attack at the table, using her signature Carmen pincer attack to completely thwart a miraculous Sierra. Tussauds reawakened his selfish desires, recognition, a desire to rise into the upper class, a desire for success, a desire for wealth and prosperity. Selfish desires are like the shadow of a hero. When selfish desires awaken, the aura dims, and Lorraine's enemy is no longer the unrivaled hero he once was. Now, he is just an ordinary colonial governor. Time for a decisive victory. Lorraine thought, and with this in mind, he timely ended Carmen's attack and initiated the final round of negotiations when Tussauds' psychological vulnerability was greatest. "Sir, what achievements do you think a qualified governor should have?" A qualified governor, Tussauds pondered for a moment, holding his coffee, to be loyal to his duty. This word. In your opinion, what can be called loyal to one's duty? From a military perspective, a governor is not a pure soldier. Lorraine interrupted Tussauds' attempt to evade the main point. You are in charge of a vast land equivalent to 1/3 of the Spanish mainland. Compared with it, the 2 divisions of the Florida garrison are not worth mentioning at all. Tussauds looked over with dissatisfaction. A strong army is the cornerstone of the kingdom. The army is the cornerstone of the kingdom, Lorraine said, but it is by no means the cornerstone of the governor. As far as I know, the considerations of colonial powers for governors are not much different: population, development, taxation, and conquest. The position of the governor is more inclined to civilian. Although it inevitably carries the responsibility of expanding territory and stabilizing the local area, your king should care more about how much money you make for him during his tenure, rather than guarding the border and leaving this wild and desolate land behind with nothing. Tussauds frowned. President, you said you wanted to talk about business, but until now, you haven't touched on our business today. In fact, every word I said was within the scope of business. I mean, mutual benefit. The Drake Chamber of Commerce has always been committed to creating a mutually beneficial business environment. This is not to say that we don't pursue profits, but we do not demand short-term profits. So my powerful business partners and I jointly launched the 100 Merchants Association to provide high-quality and low-cost business services to association members. It is precisely because of this non-compulsory profit-making that the association has attracted 397 chambers of commerce to join. The 100 Merchants Association has become the most united and dynamic trade association in the Atlantic. Last year, the association's total trade exceeded £70 million, and the top 50 members contributed only 65% of it. Among guilds of the same size, this proportion is 15% lower than the average. The same is true for pirate suppression. The association actively assumes social responsibility. In order to clarify trade routes, an average of 103 armed merchant ships and more than 3,000 naval guns are kept offline at all times. The Drake Chamber of Commerce bears 25% of this. We fought the pirates selflessly, especially in the 2 years between the victory of Yorktown and the Treaty of Paris. We succeeded to diplomatically restrained powers and became the absolute force fighting evil in the Caribbean. Why did we do this? When our comrades went bankrupt due to the war, what kept us going, instead of cowering and letting ourselves be slaughtered like most of our peers? It's mutual benefit. Lorraine stood up, waving his arms, and spoke each word with a resounding force. Merchants are profit-driven. Justice is the path we choose because we firmly believe that the path of justice can give us more, that mutual benefit can give us more. This also applies to the Miami issue. Changing the subject, Lorraine left his chair and formed a circle around the long table. Let's first consider the Lord's needs. You are a true patriotic hero. First and foremost, you must be absolutely loyal to your kingdom and your king. Any proposal that is treasonous or harms Spanish interests will contradict this need, and therefore, it is a dead letter. Lorraine crossed his arms and continued. Not harming your loyalty is the premise of our cooperation. So assuming that our proposal meets the standards, we should consider your secondary needs, money, status, respect, political achievements, and so on. The governor of Spain serves a 3-year term with no re-election limit, and there is only a year and a half left in your first term. I wonder if you have considered whether your king will agree to your re-election after your term ends. If he agrees, what reason should he use to convince his parliament and ministers? Because you prevented the British invasion during your term? This is obviously inappropriate. After 20 years of managing Florida, Britain's interest in this land has dropped to a historical low. Your only potential enemies are your ally France and the newly born United States, which is also allied with your country. Will they attack you? Or are you expecting the natives of the peninsula to attack the town? Tusara widened his eyes. How could I expect a war that is not beneficial to the country, since it's impossible? Lorraine stopped, held the back of Carmen's chair, and grinned at Tusara. Besides war, what other irreplaceable talents do you have? Loyalty. As I said before, you control a vast territory equivalent to 1/3 the size of mainland Spain. This land is located at the crossroads of the trade routes between North America and the Caribbean. Its land borders are connected to Spain's allies, and its sea borders are surrounded by other Spanish colonies. Your territory is blessed with unique advantages, and Spain has accumulated a good reputation over hundreds of years. Florida should become Spain's gold field. At least, its governor should know how to develop the territory. I apologize to you here. Lorraine bowed slightly to Tusala. Before coming here, I did a brief investigation into Florida's revenue situation. In 1784, in order to reassure people's hearts, you implemented a low tax rule in Florida. The residents' income-to-tax ratio was roughly 100 to 27. Commercial taxes were in both directions, 7% in each direction, and 11.5% after the tariff was revised. The total number of residents in the 6 towns of Florida is less than 30,000. Under this tax rate, your total tax revenue in 1784 was less than 240,000 octagonal gold coins, and only 120,000 were paid to the mainland. This amount is not even as much as the tax paid by the town of New Orleans. These words really shocked Tusala. As governor, he personally signed all tax-related documents and oversaw all distribution and remittance matters. Yet, even he hadn't calculated the burden borne by residents in a low-tax state, much less understood the tax situation in New Orleans, even though the two were so close. He couldn't help but wonder, is this how a world-class plutocrat views a regional economy? He looked at Lorraine inquiringly, not in anger, but seeking answers. But Lorraine didn't directly answer his questions, simply continuing on at his own pace. So, what's the situation in Miami, under the management of the Drake Chamber of Commerce? The Miami area only collects commercial taxes in the town of Miami Beach, one way, with a tax rate of 4%. And because it adopts the free port model, it is exempt from customs duties. Miami Beach was opened in April 1784. Initially, there were only 14 plank roads. The total tax revenue that year was £3,000 and 24,000 gold coins. In 1785, the number of plank roads increased to 37. From January to August, the total revenue is £9,000 and 72,000 octagonal gold coins. Drake has long-term plans for the Miami area. In Miami Beach alone, the docks will be expanded at a rate of 10 plank roads per year. The expansion is planned to take 10 years, so that the dock area will eventually reach 150 plank roads and 500 berths, making it the third largest commercial port in North America and the largest free port. Lorraine paused his long speech, breathing calmly, waiting for Tusula to digest everything he had heard before. After about 5 minutes, he finally asked, "What tax revenue do you think the Miami area will generate in 10 years? And in the same 10 years, what do you think the 6 towns will generate under your management?" Tusula opened his mouth weakly. "But," he said weakly, "your Miami is a disputed territory between Spain and England. Its prosperity will sooner or later bring war to Spain, so, in your mind, if England wants Barcelona, Spain should offer it before the war begins." "That's different." Tusula's eyes flushed. "Barcelona is the jewel of Spain. Its ownership is undisputed. If you insist on comparing it to Miami, then let me ask you, when England actually attacks Miami, which side will you and your Chamber of Commerce stand on? Motherland? Or treason?" The conversation paused. Thinking he had hit on Lorraine's weakness, Tusula looked up triumphantly, only to be met with shock. "Sir, we seem to have overlooked a very important detail." "Huh? Do you truly understand why I am visiting you today?" Lorraine lost her composure. It was a very rude question. Even if the two sides were debating a crucial issue, he had no right to ask such a question that bordered on a personal attack. Fortunately, Tusula, unskilled in etiquette and rhetoric, obediently followed Lorraine's lead at the crucial moment, narrowly avoiding a dangerous situation that could have derailed the entire conversation. "Aren't you here to ask me to send a mayor?" "That's certainly my purpose." Lorraine suddenly woke up. "I mean, why do I need a mayor to share the interests of Miami? It's getting dark, and when darkness is stronger than light, night will fall." Lorraine opened with a short poem. "The Drake Chamber of Commerce is powerful. In the pirate world, I am known as the Pirate King of the White Flag, and I am recognized as the most powerful pirate king of this generation in the Caribbean, but compared to the dark forces of the entire Caribbean world, piracy, smuggling, human trafficking, and selling inferior goods as good ones, Drake is absolutely the weaker party. History tells me that private colonial outposts cannot always be on the right path, because evil will erode justice, and bad money will drive out good money, and the weak can do nothing about it, so I need to find a master for Miami, a master who is more powerful than the darkness of the entire Caribbean and can bring protection and order to Miami. I don't really care who this master is. I stand before you today because for Miami, Spain is the least controversial choice at this stage, and even the current Miami can bring you considerable benefits. If you're unwilling, in 5 years, I will go and convince my motherland. If my motherland still doesn't want to, in 10 years, when America has grown up, I will even go and convince America. I'm familiar with the elites who founded the country. As long as the benefits are great enough, they are willing to make enemies with the whole world. This is the truth of today's conversation. I'm here because you need me, not because I do. It's not because you need me, it's because I do." Chapter 495 Hiring a Butler. The meeting concluded with a positive outcome, as it should. After all, ever since Carmen had stirred Sir Tusula's inner desires, a gaping hole had been ripped open in the Patriot's veneer. Lorraine, navigating this opening, effortlessly reached the heart of the hero's concerns. So-called status and respect. Respect stems from status and stabilizes it. These two aspects are two sides of the same coin. As high-level, demand-based concepts, they are precisely the precipitous wall that common heroes like Tusula strive to scale, yet never reach the summit. Lorraine's father, Elia, had taught him that a century of nurturing nurtures a true noble. In short, a commoner's chance acquisition of a title and subsequent descent into high society is merely the beginning of a family's transformation. Europe's upper class is a closed and exclusive social circle. This circle, operating for millennia, possesses its own distinct perceptions, customs, and even language, distinct from those of the common people. Even if a commoner ascends to the nobility, they are still considered outsiders, while the heirs of the nobility remain within the circle even without a title. The root of this peculiar cycle lies in the disparity between the two classes. This disparity forces heroes of common origin to greedily pursue higher status, which allows them to more fully understand the differences between the two sides and clearly define the direction of improvement. This continues, generation after generation, until they have completely shed their commoner trappings and truly establish themselves in high society, becoming a true aristocrat. Specifically, Tussera's position as governor ensured he received due respect even when unappreciated. Spain, even in the New World's most prestigious social circles, could not tolerate the prolonged absence of a powerful figure. This was the fastest and most stable path for the Tussera family's transformation. However, if he truly completed his term without any achievements, as Lorraine predicted, given his background, the only outcome awaiting him would be a dismal return home, where he would retire to a sinecure with the rank of Major General and a swath of medals. His life was over, and so was his family's transformation. When he received God's call, his family's brief journey into the upper world would end, returning to the mire of the common people. He certainly didn't want to see such a future, so when Lorraine misinterpreted Miami as his only hope for a career, he lost the power of choice. Florida Governor Baron Falby von Tussila officially decided to build a new colonial town at the mouth of the Miami River. Construction was to begin on August 12, 1785, with a moderate administrative scale expected to be completed by September 15 of the same year, and at least 2,000 people settled. Named after the river, this new city, to be born from the wilderness, would be called Miami. As the legal owner of the proposed town site, the Drake Chamber of Commerce of England would fully support this colonization effort, transcending national boundaries and promoting human civilization. This assistance included, but was not limited to: 1. Free planning for the new town, with the first phase of the plan submitted to the governor's office for review by August 15. 2. The land for the city hall, council, church, courthouse, police station, customs office, tax office, and prison, along with related buildings, will be provided to the Florida governorate free of charge, to be handed over before the establishment of the office on September 15. 3. The contract will cover the costs of immigration, undertake the transportation of immigrants, complete their resettlement by September 5, and assist the City Hall in registering the immigrants. 4. The contract will provide the first batch of immigrants with complete housing and other living facilities free of charge. 5. The contract will provide the governorate with land and anchorages necessary for garrisoning, including 1,000 acres of land and 1 kilometer of coastline northwest of the Miami River mouth, as well as the entire island of Virginia. The construction of military camps, anchorages, coastal defense batteries, and other military facilities will be the responsibility of the governorate after the establishment of the office. 6. The contract will fully commercialize land not used for military or administrative purposes, in accordance with a plan. This contract was a common method for transitioning a colony from private to public ownership, and its contents were rife with fantasy. If anyone took it seriously, they would undoubtedly believe that God had performed a miracle on earth, building a complete town overnight and bringing together devout believers from all over the world. But all Lorraine actually needed to do was hand over some administrative facilities, provide military land, and assist the City Hall in completing the household registration for the estuary. Furthermore, Miami's first mayor was confirmed, Mr. DePoyne, the current mayor of Fort St. Augustine. Tussera seemed to have misunderstood Lorraine's intentions, assuming that he chose DePoyne as his choice to lead Miami. Fortunately, this wasn't the key. Meanwhile, the general policy was also finalized. The biggest difference between Miami and historical private settlements lay in the ownership of the land. According to the normal process, adventurers would land in unfamiliar territory, plant a flag, and declare it nationalized. They would then return to their homeland or a nearby, more prosperous colony, using deception to find investment and willing relocation opportunities, bringing money and people to cultivate land under the flag. This was colonization. Therefore, the concept of colonization has always been agricultural production in unowned land. Once a colony had developed to a certain point, true secular power would intervene, seizing everything through the establishment of a town, with only modest compensation provided to the developers, investors, and initial settlers. This meant that everything in a government-run town belonged to the state, to the king and the governor-general. But this kind of transfer was completely unfeasible in Miami. Lorraine didn't assert sovereignty through crude, barbaric means like flag raising. His land transactions with the Indians were fully documented and tax paid in Britain, Spain, and the United States, perfectly adhering to the rules of civilized society. This meant that even if the land was transferred to government ownership, Spain could not deprive him of his legal property rights. Planning, construction, development, and management, all rights related to the land were firmly in the hands of the Drake Chamber of Commerce. If Miami were a mansion, City Hall no longer served as the typical owner, it was more like Lorraine's hired steward, whose salary was Miami's tax revenue. For example, Miami Beach's Port Authority was independently operated by the Drake Chamber of Commerce, and all related service fees were funded by the Chamber. Anyone wishing to purchase or lease first-hand land, property, berths, or other real estate also needs to work with the Port Authority, which also contributes to the Chamber of Commerce's revenue. Customs and tax offices, on the other hand, are municipal institutions, so tariffs and other taxes are City Hall's revenue and do not need to be shared with Lorraine. At first glance, this revenue model appears to be two parallel lines, with the Chamber of Commerce and City Hall each earning their own revenue and not interfering with each other. However, because they are borrowing Drake's land for taxation and population development, City Hall must consider Lorraine's opinions when setting the base tax rate, leaving the details to the town council. It's reasonable to assume that Lorraine will have the final say for a long time. This is the unique characteristic of living under one roof. Carmen and Dupuini, representing both sides, engaged in a heated debate over the tax rate. Ultimately, Miami's agricultural tax will be based on a 10% base rate, while commercial taxes will fluctuate between 5% and 10% depending on the type of tax. These taxes will be levied in both directions, upholding the free port's character, with no customs duties or personal consumption tax, and all other surcharges capped at 5%. Carmen also added special tax exemptions related to tax rebates. Specifically, anyone paying more than 20 octagons of gold coins in annual tax, or 500 octagons of gold coins in annual tax, would receive a tiered tax rebate. This rebate peaked at 50% at 100 coins for individuals and 2,500 coins for organizations, with settlements settled in March of the following year. Lorraine did some calculations. Under these tax rates, Miami residents, after adjusting for tax rebates, would generally pay no more than 15% of their total income, while the Chamber of Commerce's burden would be limited to 7% to 13% of local revenue, nearly half the average burden of a modern commercial port. This could make Miami the most livable town in North America, Lorraine muttered, sipping his coffee. Population, Chamber of Commerce, factories, farms, agriculture probably won't thrive on a large scale. After all, Florida doesn't allow slavery, and labor costs are prohibitive compared to other colonies, so what should the Chamber of Commerce do next? Sell land. Chapter 496 Perfect Lady. 1785, the great city of Miami was built on both sides of the Bay of Biscay in less than a month, and on its opening day, it became the most prosperous commercial town on the Florida peninsula. The newly formed town of Miami was divided into 5 districts. The Bayou District, its administrative center, had a registered population of 2,413 and a non-registered population of 537. Across the river from the district stood the barracks of the Colonial Miami Regiment, housing a 1,400-man regiment of grenadiers and 600 coastal artillerymen. Because the barracks had not yet been built, the officers and soldiers had to live in makeshift tents, living in conditions worse than those of the Indian laborers in the sheds. The College District, its cultural and educational center, had a registered population of 227 and a non-registered population of 962. Within 5 days of its establishment, the University of Miami had already attracted over 800 students from around the world, over 300 of whom were already sophomores. The Jackdaw District is Miami's technological center, with a registered population of 1,297 and a non-resident population of 3,351. Pansy Manor, Miami's most exclusive and affluent neighborhood, sits on a breathtakingly beautiful lakefront. Drake's first and special fleets, feared by the pirates of the Caribbean, maintained their headquarters here, guarding their White King. Miami Beach is Miami's commercial center, boasting 37 boardwalks and 116 large and medium-sized berths. Over 80 merchant ships navigate the docks daily, and over 100 chambers of commerce maintain permanent offices on this narrow sand island. This is Miami's most populous and developed district. While its registered population is only 262, its non-resident population reaches 5,159. Then there's the mysterious 5th District, designated the Fortified District, located further south on Virginia Island in the southern Biscaynes, across the sea from the garrison. This place is planned to be the headquarters of the Miami Garrison. The 2nd Miami Regiment, Line Regiment, and the 2nd Coastal Defense Battalion will be stationed there once the infrastructure is complete. Plans for 2 coastal defense forts, 60 large gun batteries, a naval port, and a 5-ship defense fleet are also on the desk of the governor's office in Fort St. Augustine. It seems the only thing standing in the way of their implementation is poverty. Only by visiting Miami can one truly appreciate the boundless charm of this town. Filled with emotion and anticipation, Mayor Dupuini, who had only been in office for 5 days, was filled with hope for the future. Meanwhile, in the Jackdaw district, at Pansy Manor, Lorraine signed a document, then removed his ring and stamped the fresh wax. He handed the document to Edley. Send it to New York by express ship. Have President Parker make the arrangements as soon as possible. Yes, Edley took the document and strode out. Lorraine slapped his shoulder, sighed, and took the next document and opened it. Time always flies when working. After Lorraine finished the last document at hand, wrote his instructions and signed his name, he suddenly smelled the fragrance of coffee. Henna. He looked up following the aroma and saw Carmen standing by the table with a coffee and a smile on her face. Ah, Carmen. The little fox squinted his eyes and handed the coffee over. What? It's a pity. Why, it's not Yesla. It's not a pity, it's strange. Lorraine corrected himself while taking the coffee and took a sip. Cappuccino, and it's freshly brewed. Did I fall asleep just now? Or fainted? Only people who devote themselves to their work will be unaware of the changes around them, my captain. Carmen flew to the opposite side of the desk like a butterfly and sat down. What are you going to do with the American branch? Of course I'm going to prepare. Lorraine widened his eyes halfway through his words. No, how long have you been in? About an hour and 7 minutes. At that time, you were still processing the documents for Chuck. It didn't seem suitable to be disturbed. Then what? A serious man is like the most exquisite work of art. I decided to appreciate him for a while. If I didn't know how much work you've been doing these days, I would almost suspect that you've gone crazy. Lorraine rolled her eyes in annoyance. I plan to let Chuck organize a sightseeing tour in New York. Sightseeing? Carmen tilted her head. Sightseeing? Miami, aren't the mountains and rivers here beautiful? Lorraine drank her coffee, calmly. Generally speaking, when a new colonial town is established, the colonial empire will fill the population as quickly as possible and establish the main ethnic group of this town. A loyal and sense of belonging main ethnic group is the only way to rule. They can assimilate later immigrants with culture and beliefs, control public opinion, elect parliament, and become reliable militias in the face of war to help rulers defend the town and make invaders pay the price. The same applies in Miami. Suppose we are regarded as indigenous people, the kind of powerful indigenous tribe that cannot be enslaved. Tusura wants to build a town in our habitat. The only way is to turn us into citizens together, but doing so will create a problem. We will become the majority ethnic group in Miami, controlling not only all the land in the city, but also public opinion and the town's parliament, turning the city hall into a useful tool to embody our ruling consciousness. Tusura is a true patriot. As long as his own interests are protected, there is no reason for a patriot to sit idly by and watch the tentacles of his motherland being used as tools. Lorraine stretched lazily. According to our discussion with the town council, the current interim council will only last until December 31st. An election committee will be established on New Year's Day next year. The town's 23 council seats will be allocated to each district according to the number of registered residents, and each district will conduct independent elections based on the number of seats. In other words, as long as the number of Spanish immigrants exceeds the number of our naturalized employees and family members before January 1st of next year, the Spaniards will have a chance to occupy the majority in Parliament. The greater their lead, the greater the chance of an advantage, so we may welcome a large number of Spanish immigrants at any time. Those bankrupt farmers, those businessmen who have confidence in the development of Miami, and perhaps some of us are acquaintances among them. After all, there are 66 Spanish businessmen in the association, second only to Great Britain. Didn't Sir Tusura tell me on the day of the town founding ceremony that he wanted me to implement the construction of the 6th agricultural and animal husbandry town as soon as possible? Even after I analyzed with him the fatal blow that Fort Mose would bring to the plantation economy, he still remained true to his original intention. I guess he was already thinking about the issue of immigration at that time, and he didn't care how many wealthy plantation owners would be born among them. He just wanted to ensure that every Spaniard who crossed the ocean could support himself. At this point, Lorraine paused. Then, how should we deal with it? Refuse. Miami's size and geographical location destined it not to become Drake's backyard, nor is it suitable for our family to run it like Sandina. That would be detrimental to Miami's development, and we don't need so much land. On the other hand, as long as we don't refuse immigration, the current situation where we have the right to speak with land is temporary. With the influx of population, whether it is sold at a high price, a low price or given as a reward, the land will always be diluted into the hands of the citizens, and no one can stop it. Combining these 2 points, Carmen's eyes suddenly lit up. I understand, Caribbean Sea. As expected, there are never any obstacles in communicating with you. Lorraine grinned happily. What we have to do now is to adapt, welcome, and do everything we can to profit from this wave of immigration. First, include Miami's land and housing in the Chamber of Commerce's temporary rewards to encourage our employees to move in with their families. The Chamber of Commerce still has a lot of surplus population. At least so far, there are less than 50 families of sailors directly under the fleet who have settled here. Second, use the network of the American branch to publicize Miami's bright prospects throughout the New World. Unlike the European branch, the American branch has appeal throughout the Caribbean. They can bring us the British and French, as well as pioneers from Central, Southern and Northern Europe. Compared to the large-scale British immigration organized by the European branch, the trend promoted by the American branch and the spontaneous and scattered migration of immigrants will not easily make the sensitive governor's office wary of us, but the population structure will also become complicated. Once the population structure is complex, it will be difficult for the main ethnic group to emerge. Even if the Spanish remain the largest ethnic group in Miami in the end, their influence will be minimized. This is a good thing for Miami. Carmen frowned, pulling a piece of paper from the table. She picked up a quill and began writing quickly. After a while, she threw the pen away and showed Lorraine her newly drawn chart. The population curve for the next stage, she pointed to the line with the highest initial peak and the smallest fluctuations. Miami has a registered population of 4,199, and Drake's employees and family members number 3,775. City Hall doesn't have such clear data, and they also have to consider our growth. To ensure population advantage, they will definitely treat it as 4,200 people, according to the migration that is most beneficial to them. Before the election committee is established on January 1st next year, more than 4,200 Spanish settlers will move in, totaling 4,500, an average of 1,500 per month. There is also the population of immigrants from America. Although this is difficult to estimate, based on the influence of the Beishang Association and Drake's reputation, we can barely apply a gradual model, with a total estimate of 2,000, that is to say, in the next 3 months, Miami will usher in a peak in naturalization. By the end of December, the registered population is likely to exceed 10,000, and most of them will move in at the same time as they become naturalized. By next year, the population growth rate will definitely slow down significantly after the election season, but because it is mainly composed of American settlers and our employees, it is estimated that it can still maintain an average of 800 to 1,000 people per month. By 1787, Miami will have a registered population of 20,000 and a permanent population approaching 40,000. By then, the town council will have to be expanded. Regardless of whether Spain wins or loses the first election, it won't hold a majority. Carmen suddenly popped her head out from behind the paper and stared at Lorraine with immense excitement. Captain, this is a massive wave of colonial development unprecedented in the history of the New World. It's a golden opportunity for us to cash in on our investments. She leaped to her feet. Before Christmas, all current staff at the asset management company must be on duty, and part-time staff will no longer be called upon by their primary departments. You must support me. Lorraine froze. Carmen, seeing a business opportunity, was terrifying. She looked less like she was going to a business than to go to war, a major war. He touched his nose with a weak look on his face. Well, not to mention the full-time employees in the asset management company, many part-time employees hold important positions in various departments. Anyway, you don't have any major action plans recently. Besides, An ordinary round of land sales or a business opportunity comparable to New Orleans, even if there is a big action, it is worth putting it on hold for this time. I'll say hello to each department, I'll move back today. The perfect lady was full of vigor. From now on, that place is the flagship. Chapter 497 God of War, Invincible. October draws to a close, and autumn deepens. The agony of the scorching summer heat seems like yesterday, but when the clouds obscure the sun, one can indeed feel the wind picking up. Autumn's footsteps rush from land to sea, bringing the coolness of the mountains and the polar regions, gently kicking the sailors' faces. Hey! Hey! Ha! Oh! The autumn air is crisp, and deep in the vast Bay of Biscay, two high-spirited fleets, like knights, soar through the waves. They are the first and special service formations of the Drake General Chamber of Commerce's direct fleet. Today marks the first formal fleet-level confrontation exercise since the direct fleet was established. Actual naval combat confrontation exercises are absolutely new in this era. With the development of naval guns, the high temperatures and pressures upon discharge have long reached a level that only metal bullets can withstand. Cloth-wrapped lime would undoubtedly catch fire and leak inside the barrel. Rubber and wooden bullets might manage to fire, but due to deformation, they would be far from realistic data, rendering them useless as a reference. Naval warfare is inseparable from artillery engagement, and artillery engagement is inseparable from artillery shells. If metal shells were actually used, the drill wouldn't be a drill at all, it would be an internal conflict. In short, news of the internal conflict within Drake's direct fleet spread across the New World like a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. This groundbreaking live-fire exercise immediately attracted widespread attention. All units were in place for the exercise. White, Special Operations Force of the Drake Chamber of Commerce's direct fleet. Flagship, Valkyrie-class frigate HMS Attis, 54 guns, Aegis-class destroyers, future and new generation, 40 guns, Bermuda Brig-class frigate HMS Ostrich, 26 guns, Bermuda Brig-class communications ship HMS Sunflower, 16 guns, Force Commander, Pierce Attis. Black, the first fleet of the Drake Chamber of Commerce. Flagship, the second-generation Servant-class destroyer Mistra, 42 guns, companions, Servant-class destroyers Brunhild and Grey, 40 guns, Bermuda-class Brig-class destroyers, Merlin, Sea Parrot, Sea Sparrow, Fregatebird, and White Pelican, 26 guns, Bermuda-class Brigantine-class destroyers, Dark Champagne, Hydrangea, and Oleander, 16 guns, Fleet Commander, Valrhona Hanji. The two sides outnumber each other by a staggering 5-11. Whether in terms of number of ships, gun ports, or crew, the First Fleet holds a commanding advantage over the Special Forces fleet. This vast disparity in hardware seems to further confirm the increasingly widespread rumor. Young Admiral Hanji falls in love with the even younger Admiral Attis, who, after accepting his confession, becomes entangled with the beautiful female sailors on board, and is even caught in an affair by Admiral Hanji. Indeed, this was a thoroughly personal vendetta, a duel fueled by love and hate, a classic example of misappropriation of public resources. The impulsiveness of youth became the Drake Guild's Achilles heel in this incident. President Drake had lost control of his subordinates. Though he managed to come up with a clever excuse that could have deceived ordinary people, everyone knew that regardless of victory or defeat, the once mighty Drake fleet would be severely weakened. Drake's fleet, once as powerful as the colonial government, was finished. Lorraine Drake's fate would end in such a ridiculous manner. The situation in the Caribbean had taken a turn, with dark clouds obscuring the sun and evil rising once more. Who would stand up to protect the interests of the merchants? Who would be held accountable for the pirates, united by the activism of the 100 Merchants Guild, now about to lose their restraints? And what about the future? Amidst all sorts of speculation and anxiety, the clock struck 9 o'clock. At 9 o'clock in the morning on October 28, 1785, dark clouds, strong winds, and moderate waves. Yatrin solemnly stepped onto the Valkyrie's deck, carrying a black and white flag. Already, 1,000 meters to port, saturated with solid ammunition, 3 salvos ordered, ready, fire, boom, 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 boom. The Mistra, 3 hours ago. The sun was rising. Petite Fafnir, draped in a large windbreaker, lay sprawled on the upper deck, a swaying extension of the ship's bow. Blushing, her head lowered, her flowing bangs obscuring most of her face, revealing only her rosy lips and the tip of her perky nose. Spread out before her was a map of the battlefield's seas. The vast expanse, 10 kilometers long and wide, was surrounded on 3 sides by land, seemingly devoid of any islands or reefs, yet countless lines were added to the chart, reflecting currents and depths. These lines were applied on separate transparent layers, and when superimposed, a distinct pattern could be seen. She continued to add 7 or 8 layers of hydrological information, including wind conditions, tidal lines, fishing routes, and other factors that were rarely considered, though they had little impact. The chart finally became a mess, a dense web of lines painted across the surface. Farina took a deep breath, then covered the fleet formation diagram, writing furiously in the blank spaces. Over half an hour later. "Admiral, is it finished?" Captain Grimm, the fleet's vice admiral in the gray, asked cautiously. Barely." Farina lowered her head further, almost completely buried in the thick writing board. A thin, drifting sound stuttered from the board, as if the chart itself were speaking. Trust can sometimes be such a magical thing. 20 or so men, young and old, captains of various ships, and crew from the flagship, gathered around a shy little girl, no one missing her whisper, even though she spoke so little to begin with, and they trusted it with unwavering confidence. Now that the work was done, it was time to issue orders. The men waited in silence. Fafner's small hand grasped the edge of the large backboard, trembling and dodging as she passed it to the only woman beside her, Anne Rowling, the Mistral's first mate. "Order." Anne supported the enormous, 1 meter long and wide board with one hand, her upper and lower arms bulging with muscles. "First, all ships, thoroughly inspect the practice rounds. The Admiral has discovered that some of the rounds are leaking, approximately 3%, which will affect their effectiveness. This hidden danger must be eliminated before actual combat." Yes, the voices of more than 20 people shook the world. "Second, correct your thoughts. The Lady is a Valkyrie-class ship. Although we have the advantage in total numbers, please don't forget Bastel. The pirates also have the advantage in total numbers." Yes. Third, the basic tactic is to divide and conquer. Mystra, Merlin, and White Pelican will harass the Lady, while Hydrangea and Oleander will patrol the outer lines to prevent it from breaking out. Yes, Brunhilde will face the future, Grey will face the new generation, Sea Sparrow will face the ostrich, and Puffin, Fregatibird, and Dark Champagne will attack Sunflower. After defeating Sunflower, attack in reverse order. Yes. Fourth, dispatch a special lookout to receive orders from the flagship. Detailed battle orders will be based on flag signals. Yes. 5. The pursuit line is set at 5 kilometers from the flagship. Don't pursue a disparate enemy. Yes. After delivering the orders, Anne put down the big board, leaned close to Fafner's ear and whispered, "Admiral, give me a lecture." Then, everyone. Fafner wrung her windbreaker, breathing heavily. "Anyway, it's still early, and shift changes are allowed. Please go back and rest, captains, return to your ships." Anne translated with a resounding voice and chest-puffed out her chest. "The entire fleet will have a meal, 2 shifts will rotate, and will wait for the order to go to battle. Do you understand?" "Yes, we follow the goddess of victory," Anne shouted. "The Shy Goddess is invincible," everyone echoed. The first formation, Invincible. Chapter 498 Under the Eternal Appearance. On the eve of the command, the Lady of Atis, Pierce was lost in thought, his arm resting on the command post's railing. His eyes wandered, bleary, and he would occasionally yawn, shedding a few glistening tears. The command post's view was undoubtedly excellent. Even a slacker like Admiral Atis, the conqueror of Muscat, one of them, could still see the entire deck clearly, even between moments of daze. Old Dylan was lecturing the sailors on the forecastle. As the father of everyone in the Special Forces formation, he was a master of disciplining, his sharp words always yielding profound insights. For a moment, Pierce didn't know whether to mourn or rejoice for the 2 sailors. The aft deck was Turner's world. As the ship's first mate and sailman, his work never required interference. Steady Ray checked the steering wheel at Pierce's feet, while the spirited Andrea watched the sea breeze overhead. Mardelio, hidden in Pierce's blind spot, was actually preparing the guns in the gun bay. On deck, Hashem was also there, buried in a chart by the side, and Zio Sanmei, shadowing Pierce. If Freemoney, aboard the new codename, was included, Pierce's entire team was now fully staffed, with Hugh Sharon, Falaman, and KO absent. The General Chambers Asset Management Company entered a special Level 1 combat readiness state. The Admiral entered the bridge, The jump engines activated, and the Drake Real Estate Speculation Group advanced 4 meters, directly pulling the magnificent Xavier mansion on the lakeside into a wormhole in a universe completely parallel to the real world. It was indeed there. The people of Universe 616 could use countless methods to prove the mansion's existence, but they had absolutely no way of contacting any of the carbon-based life within it. This whole thing was just nonsense. From receiving the notice of the actual combat exercise at 9 a.m. 3 days ago to officially confirming the location and equipment at 9 a.m. yesterday, Pierce Artis, the dignified vice chairman of the General Chamber of Commerce and vice president of the Chamber of Commerce, had been squatting outside the Schrödinger mansion for a full 3 hours. 17 people, both known and unknown, boarded his carriage, clutching documents, yet he was unable to hold even the simplest conversation with a single one. He knocked on the door, but no one answered. He spoke, but no one took it. Pierce even handed over a letter requesting an audience, treating himself like a complete stranger, and delivered it with both hands to a maid passing through the hallway. Even as the hard seal of the letter clattered to the polished marble floor, the maid, with her rimmed eyes, looking both exhausted and excited, never once glanced at him. Did he not exist? The moment the letter landed, Pierce fell into deep philosophical doubt. Baruch de Spinoza had taught him that everything, as long as it exists in itself, strives to maintain its existence. But only God in the universe possesses a perfect state of freedom. Anyone who connects with someone or something is enslaved in an unconscious realm, no longer free. Therefore, if he were enslaved, uncomfortable, and disconnected from God, his existence would naturally become precarious, for he had lost the ground upon which to maintain his existence. Could it be? I had vanished? Pierce panicked, his consciousness suddenly fragmented in his anxiety. By the time his shattered consciousness reconnected, the philosophical enlightenment had dissipated from his soul, and the morning star had already set high in the heavens. At that moment, Pierce's panic deepened. Unconsciously, he had returned from Carmen's house to his own, ignoring all the greetings along the way, and sat at his desk for a whole day and night. Tomorrow. There was still a war to be fought today. What kind of epiphany was this? Could it be that God had truly lost contact, and was it a ghost protecting him? In this state, Pierce received the call for the drill, and since 4 a.m., he had been battling nightmares, and had persisted until now. He had a bad feeling. He felt that if he fell asleep, even if a bomb exploded next to his head, he would never wake up. Was it over? Pierce asked himself. It's over, right? Pierce answered himself. The command boomed. 3 muffled thunderclaps echoed from the Valkyrie, 20 kilometers away, now disorganized and fragmented. But the sound was audible nonetheless. To ensure the command resounded across the vast battlefield, Atrin abandoned the traditional saturated round-fire system and opted for a single-sided, parallel-hulled approach that would never be used in actual combat. Over 20 large-caliber naval guns fired simultaneously within 2 seconds, the mixed sound carried far into the distance. The immense recoil lifted the Valkyrie's freeboard high, and the flying shells covered a vast sea area from 800 to 1,500 meters, creating a cloud of mist. This was probably the worst shot Atrin had ever fired in his life. On the mountainside, directly north of the battlefield, Lorraine thought this from his makeshift observation deck. As he thought, he raised his telescope and aimed it at the battlefield. The First Fleet and the Special Service Fleet launched an attack towards the center of the battlefield at the same moment the command was sounded. The first formation adopted a traditional inverted V formation, with the flagship, Mistra, at the forefront, the other ships deployed symmetrically to the wings according to the number of their gun ports. The Special Forces formation was quite unusual. The future and the new generation advanced side by side, with a lady following closely behind, maintaining their center. Behind the lady was the headless ostrich, and behind the headless ostrich was the sunflower. Lorraine let out a soft hum, lowered his binoculars, and with a searching glance, he found Catalina, who was still severely injured and still confined to her wheelchair. Pierce's formation. Catalina, when you were discussing the details of the exercise with him yesterday, did he tell you anything? No, Catalina shrugged helplessly. I only saw Dylan and Freeman yesterday, and we didn't talk about the details of the exercise, because Pierce hadn't told his sailors anything at that time. Then, what about Hanji? I didn't see Fafner either. Catalina covered her forehead in pain. She was busy drawing behind closed doors. I only saw Annie and Bill Grimm, and we didn't discuss the details of the exercise either. Fafnir won't decide anything before knowing all the information. Lorraine opened her mouth weakly. Are you sure you told them that you are the commander-in-chief of this live-fire exercise? Well, I said it once when I announced the order 3 days ago, a second time when I announced the battlefield yesterday, and a third time when we met. That's a bit. Lorraine thought for a long time but couldn't come up with a suitable description, so he could only change the subject casually. I've heard of Hanji's talent for mapping and combat habits, but how come Pierce? Dylan said he seemed upset with Carmen. He's been acting strangely since the way back. Really strange, Carmen. Lorraine's face suddenly changed, as if he'd heard something incredible. He went to see Carmen. Catalina nodded, confused. Carmen took away Khal Drogo, Flamin Snaps, and Little Sharon. Of those three, only Little Sharon has no battlefield assignment. Flamin is the formation's primary combat staff officer, and Kahlo is the core of the boarding operation. Pierce is going to pick them up was justified. But Carmen, it's only been 4 days. Even if you issued a priority order, she's been incredibly unkind. No, Lorraine retorted weakly. If Pierce had seen Carmen, she would have definitely given them to him. The reason things turned out this way, I guess Pierce probably didn't even enter Xavier's house. Cyrillic letter there. P.S. The eternal aspect is the core of Spinoza's philosophy. The eternal aspect is God, the universe, the combination of all matter and spirit, the only eternal self-existence in existence. In this chapter, Pierce's philosophical doubts are the philosophical thoughts of Spinoza. How should I put it? This argument is very subtle. It's hard to even say whether he's materialistic or idealistic. That's it. Chapter 499 How merciful. This is what happened. Facing the oncoming wave of Miami immigrants, Carmen went into full combat mode. Over 50 high-speed vessels, operating at speeds exceeding 60 knots, used the most efficient means of transport available at the time to bring 146 elite professionals from around the world, including business experts, construction specialists, intelligence experts, ethnic relations specialists, human resources experts, and a small number of other professionals, to Xavier's mansion at Pansy Manor. These were the elite civilians cultivated and recruited by the Drake Chamber of Commerce over the years. While enjoying special part-time allowances from asset management companies, they also shouldered heavy responsibilities in their respective departments, rarely gathering in large numbers, even for annual meetings. The last such frenzied gathering was on the eve of the Paris Agreement. On that occasion, the Drake Chamber of Commerce had completed its deployment across all 13 North American states, with personnel arriving at ports and ships in place, 12 days after the lifting of the British and American trade embargo. The following month, the Caribbean branch was fully upgraded to the Americas branch, its headquarters relocated to New York, and a series of trade contracts were signed. The Maritime Group acquisition and the Miami Aerial legal proposal were also formalized during that period. Carmen's all-encompassing strategy catapulted her to fame in the American business world. It has long since become a classic example of how she temporarily pooled her team's intelligence to significantly enhance their design and execution capabilities during a specific period, seizing the initiative through a whirlwind of commercial aggression. The Drake Chamber of Commerce profited handsomely from that battle, and even the financial gains were secondary. More importantly, it laid an unwavering foundation for the Chamber's current leadership in the North American business world. Follow Xavier and you'll have sweet treats. This is a well-known business opportunity throughout Central and North America. Most of those who saw it last time had already cashed in on the benefits. This time, the even larger scale gathering naturally caused a stir in the business world. But Carmen was truly busy. This time, she had to complete the unfinished Miami City plan within 3 months, accurately distinguishing between sellable and unsellable. Within the sellable area, she had to identify easy to sell and difficult to sell, sell now and sell later, high price and low price, and high end and low end. The first branch was the easiest. Lorraine didn't intend to put all her eggs in one basket, and Drake's focus was entirely on industry. Therefore, they cleared the land centered around the Jackdaw and Academy districts to create a comprehensive industrial zone with smooth transportation and flat land. The rest could be sold. The second branch wasn't too difficult either. Easy to sell land generally met the 3 key criteria of transportation, topography, and resources. Land that met all 3 was first class, 2 second class, and 1 third class. Naturally, the rest was difficult to sell. Starting with the third branch, the workload suddenly intensified. Miami was still relatively unknown, and its land value was limited. Compared to European metropolises like London and Paris, it wasn't even highly regarded in the Americas. However, the core profit of Miami development lay in the potential for land appreciation. With a population gathering and commerce flourishing, its value was bound to rise rapidly. Carmen's task was to assess the potential for appreciation and added value of each plot of land and arrange a reasonable cycle for land release. While attracting investors with high-quality plots, she cleverly coaxed those frustrated by the competition to withdraw from the lesser-quality plots. Of course, a substantial premium would be even better. The fourth branch involved detailed planning. High prices and low prices, if translated according to later conventions, essentially refer to industrial and commercial land versus agricultural land. Miami had no agricultural future, at least in terms of agricultural production costs. It was completely unable to compete with the abusive plantations of slavery. This was an inherent weakness of Florida. After all, the majority of slaves at the time were black and Native Americans. Florida had banned the slave trade, but was not yet able to defeat the vast Indian population. Therefore, Miami's initial agricultural structure was inevitably a small farm economy similar to Pansy Manor, where families owned a few to dozens of acres of land, with one herder raising the herd and the other cultivating the land. Small farms can't generate significant profits or attract significant capital, but as long as they're large enough, they can accommodate most low-end migrants. At first glance, the value of these lands seems diminished. The same land used for industrial and commercial purposes would undoubtedly create more direct value. However, low-end migrants represent labor, and labor is a resource, crucial for the development of towns into cities. Considering that abundant labor potential will significantly increase Miami's appeal to capital, and that a balanced distribution will also increase the premium for low-quality land, Carmen must determine in advance the proportion of agricultural land throughout the region to meet population demand without compromising Miami's existing industrial and commercial character. Finally, the fifth branch of planning focuses solely on industrial and commercial land. More specifically, it addresses the premium paid for industrial and commercial land. Rome wasn't built in a day, and Carmen only has 3 months, and the Chamber of Commerce has limited manpower and materials available. However, warehouses are undoubtedly more valuable than land, and villas are undoubtedly more valuable than barren hills. To maximize profits, Carmen must maximize her manpower and materials, allocating them wisely within 3 months to maximize their value in the most suitable locations, attracting buyers with high enough bids that wouldn't cause Drake too much trouble. The workload was so tedious and complex that Carmen wished she were a millionaire. Yet, even at this critical juncture, someone was still trying to intrude on her time. They were business people who had settled in Miami in the past 2 years, owned real estate, had business ties with the city, were interested in relocating, or were planning to establish business there. To better manage their assets, keep up with Carmen's frenzy, and seize rare business opportunities, they racked their brains to create opportunities to visit. Their targets might be Carmen herself, or perhaps the elite secluded at Xavier's house. Regardless, Carmen felt the ultimate loss of her time wasted. In the first half of the first day of the closure, Carmen, in her excitement, neglected the no-visitor order. As a result, she received 17 people. The entire Xavier mansion, which only had 39 people assembled at the time, saw a total of 257 visitors. The arbitrating, small talk. Carmen found her team unable to get any real work done. Furthermore, due to the negligence of 2 of her subordinates, a lot of information was leaked, further complicating the external situation. In the second half of the day, the no-visitor order was issued, and Xavier Mansion closed its doors to visitors. Friendships suddenly became valuable. Those with connections to the middle and upper echelons of the Drake Chamber of Commerce and those with significant business dealings began to use their friends to get information. Over the course of 8 hours, Carmen received 6 people outside the no-visitor order, for a total of 97 visitors to Xavier Mansion. Despite the significant decrease in visitors, Carmen's team was still unable to get anything done. The next day, the no-visitor order was further expanded, restricting both internal and private visits to the Chamber of Commerce. Carmen didn't forbid it, but all information about the visit had to be approved by the butler before it could be passed on to the relevant personnel. Finally, Carmen's team was able to get something done. After about a week of peace, all sorts of bizarre visits finally began to emerge. The visitors were either too high-ranking for Carmen to refuse, or they had bribed guards and maids to sneak into Xavier's house. Carmen had been observing this situation for 10 days. While high-ranking individuals were difficult to invite, the bribery of the eunuchs became increasingly rampant, ultimately leading to a decline in the team's efficiency. That day, Carmen stopped working, and everyone at Xavier's house, eunuchs and team members alike, gathered on the lawn in front of the mansion. Carmen randomly selected 3 maids, 2 guards, a gardener, and a steward from the eunuchs. In a spirit of equality for both sexes, she rewarded each with 100 lashes of lashings. She then called a doctor, meticulously bandaged their wounds with notices of dismissal, liquidated damages, and medical expenses, and then shooed them out. That evening, at dinner, Carmen officially announced the most stringent, extreme, and outrageous no-visit order in the history of the Xavier house, the turn-a-blind-eye order that nearly turned Pierce into a philosopher. Furthermore, this order was never made public in any way. Furthermore, after dinner, little Sharon made a special trip to visit Lorraine and delivered Carmen's invitation via a message. She said she had something important to discuss. At this point, Catalina had completely guessed what was going to happen next. She patted the armrest of the wheelchair gently. "You went. Do I have any reason to doubt it? What was the result? You know, Carmen's guard captain is an old crew member of mine. What's more, I also have a request that I can't refuse, and I took someone to see Carmen. Although it was just that one time, there are many people in Xavier's house who know me. I met the guard captain at the front door. Not only did he kindly remind me that Carmen was in a bad mood, he also took me in through the side door, avoiding the main entrance where people were coming and going." Then, Lorraine sighed. Maybe she felt pity for the sting operation she directed? At least she didn't fire her own guard captain. After whipping him, he was hung up. "I heard he was hung for 5 days. God, how merciful." Catalina's voice was flat. Lorraine raised the telescope again, imitating Catalina's tone. "Yes, how merciful." Chapter 500 Product Exhibition. Full sail, charge. Dylan's roar could be heard throughout the lady. Pierce was a bit off-kilter today. The absent-minded admiral slouched to the command post. Aside from the gunnery signal to sail, he issued no further orders. All other orders fell to Vice Admiral Dylan Snaps, who had been temporarily transferred to the lady. Fortunately, as everyone's dead, Dylan held considerable prestige and popularity within the Special Forces. His orders were carried out in record time. At a distance of 1,000 meters, the lady, under full sail, surged forward, suddenly breaking from its lagging position and quickly overtaking the Zheng Anyue, which were advancing alongside them. Not to be outdone, the Zheng Anyue, trailing by only half a ship length, completed their acceleration preparations. The distance between the 3 ships widened, and the Special Forces formation transformed in the blink of an eye from the subtle, incomprehensible tuning fork to the powerful, trident assault. The 3 strongest of the 5 ships took the lead, a subtle, protecting the relatively weaker brig and brigantine in the middle. In unison, they launched a swift and coordinated charge towards the first formation. The change was so rapid. The viewing platform erupted in exclamations, including from observers experienced in naval warfare from various countries, such as Nelson and Collingwood in Box 3. A brilliant change of formation. Nelson lowered his telescope and casually grabbed a pen and writing board that came standard on the desk. "Cuthbert, look, this is the tuning fork formation that young Pierce used before. It looks careless and amateurish." He drew 5 triangles of varying sizes on the board. The largest in the center was, of course, the lady. The 2 medium-sized ones at the ends were the future and the new generation. The 2 smallest ones at the end were the headless ostrich and the sunflower. The first-generation servant class is a standard backbone ship type in Drake's system. Compared with the classic French type, its combat capability is slightly weakened, but its pursuit and escape capability is greatly enhanced. But she also has a not-so-obvious flaw, which is her defense. Although the ship material and hull thickness are the same as the classic French type, the actual ability to resist artillery fire has been greatly reduced due to 2 major reasons: sensitive center of gravity and narrower ship width. The first-generation servant class lacks the dogfighting potential of the classic French type, so they are not suitable as the core, but are more suitable for flanking maneuvers. Their usage is somewhat similar to our use of the brig, of course. The combat effectiveness of the 2 is completely not on the same level. He drew a bunch of circles on the front of the tuning fork. The earlier tuning fork formation gave people the feeling that Pierce Jr. was going to use the servant to lure the enemy, the Valkyrie-class headhunter, and then use the 2 brigs to pick up leaks and rescue from the back, acting as insurance. Doing so not only wasted the Valkyrie class's dominant strength on the defensive end, but also forced the servant class to fight. It's a typical case of playing to one's weaknesses and avoiding one's strengths, and it's useless. But through the formation change just now, I finally realized that I completely underestimated their current level. The tuning fork looks like a battle formation, but it's actually a pre-formation. With the Valkyrie class advancing, just like they are doing now, the tuning fork becomes the trident of the assault. The two servant class don't need to move, and their role changes from luring the enemy to headhunting. With just a small change, all the ships have found the most suitable position for themselves, and this is not the only change in the tuning fork. Nelson drew a few arrows on the paper and expanded the arrowhead tips into new triangles composed of dotted lines. Change 1. The servant class pulls its rudder wide and cuts diagonally along the enemy line, turning the tuning fork into a Y. The Valkyrie class and the two Bermudas that remain in their original positions become a standard strong head position straight line assault, suitable for tearing apart enemy forces with weak formations. Change 2. The two Bermudas pull away from the Valkyrie class. The Valkyrie class slowly moves forward, squeezing the two servant class ships to both sides. In this way, the tuning fork becomes a W with a strong hard and clever wings, which is the most resilient ship posture defense, strong attack, tearing, and fighting. Behind this seemingly incompetent formation, there are actually so many comprehensive response changes, and the Special Forces formation can actually practice a marching pre-formation to show the rigor and stability of a battle formation. Obviously, this is still an exquisite trap. Nelson took a deep breath, raised his pen, and framed all the circles in a big cross. Start at 1000, complete the formation change and acceleration before 800, and then approach. At this distance, his opponents had no time to make precise, targeted adjustments. They could only expose their weaknesses and leave the rest to God's judgment. That's truly astonishing. Collingwood nodded in agreement. We must admit that the peace that began in 1982 has greatly hampered our exploration and research into close combat. I read Drake's battle report against the Portuguese in Muscat. It was as bold and brilliant as ever. His tactical prowess is beyond reproach. His flagship has always been a formidable force, and we all know that, but today, his flagship served as the referee ship. None of his sailors, save for that naval stooge, Little Pierce, were in either of the two battle formations. I hate to admit that a Chamber of Commerce has surpassed Great Britain in its research into the future of naval warfare, but it seems Drake is indeed ahead, both in ships and tactics. The excitement of the two men suddenly faded. The knowledge that the invincible British Royal Navy was no longer the world's most far-sighted maritime organization was a difficult one for the two young, promising officers to bear. I've made up my mind. Collingwood suddenly clenched his fists. I'm going to convince the Lord to intervene in your trial. You can't remain idle like this. Our warships need to be mobilized, too. They can't be tied to the dockyard by the civil servants' budgets. Cuthbert, Nelson was moved to tears by his friend's bravery, but he knew deep down that this was inappropriate. After years of house arrest, he knew full well that Sir Parker had played an ignominious role behind the scenes, a punishment for his betrayal. So he tried to dissuade Collingwood. He couldn't let him blindly rush into the attack, ultimately failing to save him and ruining his own career. But before he could utter a word of advice, someone suddenly interrupted from the box door. Colonel Collingwood, I urge you to remain silent on the matter of Colonel Nelson. They both turned around, and Nelson's eyes immediately lit up. Drake, I thought you wouldn't be able to come today. After all, the entire stand is a money-making opportunity, isn't it? Lorraine replied with a sly grin. Yes, the entire stand is an opportunity to make money, Nelson repeated. I can't understand why you invited so many people to watch your weapons show. A lot of military secrets will be revealed today. From a military point of view, this is not something to brag about. You are looking at me from a military perspective again. Lorraine walked in with his hands spread out. From a business perspective, I have prepared 150 invitations this time, 100 of which were sent to fleets of various countries and powerful consortiums, and the other 50 were distributed on the black market in auction houses. Let me tell you a business secret. The revenue from the hype of the invitations alone has offset the cost of building this viewing platform and mobilizing 2 training formations. I even made a small profit. Small profit? Why? Lorraine opened his arms towards the fiercely fighting sea like a competent shopping guide. Because today's exercise has been a product display of the maritime group from the very beginning. After the exercise, I will introduce you to the trade managers of the group's 3 major shipyards, and by the way, I will convene a small-scale auction. The main items include some cutting-edge ships that will be delivered in 2 to 4 years and several plots of land with excellent size, terrain, and architecture. Colonel Collingwood, let's not talk about this fugitive who came to watch the naval battle under house arrest. Lorraine smiled and sat down, crossing his legs and looking at Collingwood beside Nelson. As the plenipotentiary representative of the Royal Navy's New World Fleet, do you want to add a few new ships for Sir Parker? Collingwood's face was gloomy. For the time being, Drake, I'm just curious why you are stopping me from submitting the correct petition. Maybe it's because being correct often makes the result difficult to achieve. Lorraine weighed his words. Your letter will not change anything, Colonel Collingwood. On the contrary, I happen to know that Her Great Majesty George has begun to pay attention to Colonel Nelson's case, considering that the Royal Navy has almost no combat missions at this stage and has cut a large number of middle-level officers in order to save military expenditure. I think Colonel Nelson is more suitable to continue to maintain this controversial house arrest and remain in the attention of His Majesty and the Admiralty for a long time. Colonel Nelson, what do you think? I agree, Nelson smiled. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.